Hello, a very good morning. It's 7 o'clock. Coming up on today's show, the results roll in from the local elections across England and Wales, and it's a big night for Labour with victory in the Blackpool South by-election.
What could it mean for the Prime Minister? In the next few minutes, we'll get reaction from the Conservative Party chairman.
Plus, disappointment for Boris Johnson. He was turned away from his local polling station after forgetting to bring an acceptable form of ID.
And in sport, Aston Villa are beaten 4-2 at home by Olympiacos in the first leg of their Europa Conference League semi-final.
It's Friday, the 3rd of May.
I declare that Christopher Paul Webb is duly elected as the Member of Parliament for the Blackpool South constituency.
Keir Starmer hails a seismic win for Labour in Blackpool South with a swing of more than 26% from the Conservatives. The Tories scraped into second place, just 117 votes ahead of Reform. Gains for Labour in the council elections too, making its biggest advance in areas that voted for Brexit. In other news, US President Joe Biden calls for order after police clear student protests in Los Angeles.
And Tottenham's hopes of Champions League football next season are hanging by a thread after defeat at Chelsea in the Premier League.
Hello, a very good morning, and thanks for joining us here on The Breakfast Show this morning. So results have been rolling in from the local elections in England and Wales and the Blackpool South by-election. What they show so far is a big night for Labour and losses everywhere for the Conservatives. Well, Sam Coates is here with us throughout the morning to help us make sense of everything that's happened. Lots of detail coming in all the time. Let's just tell you about Blackpool South, though, because Labour's Chris Webb will become the area's new MP. He won more than 10,000 votes, and that gave him a majority of 7,500 over the Conservative on a huge swing of 26%. The Tories scraped into second place, just 117 votes ahead of Reform. Well, our chief correspondent, political correspondent, John Craig reports now from Blackpool.
I declare that Christopher Paul Webb is duly elected as the Member of Parliament for the Blackpool South constituency.
An emphatic victory for Labour's Chris Webb in Blackpool South, a majority of more than 7,500 and a 26% swing. Enough to put Sir Keir Starmer in Downing Street.
People are fed up because nothing seems to work anymore. Hard up because of the Conservative cost of living crisis. But instead of giving up, they got up and voted for change with Labour. Only Keir Starmer's Labour Party has the vision and the ideas to make life better for everyone in our country.
The Conservatives' David Jones was only narrowly ahead of Reform UK's Mark Butcher in second place.
We're the party on the up, and what's rapidly becoming clear, you're seeing it in some council elections elsewhere in the North East, is that we're becoming the real opposition in the North to the Labour Party, and I think that will continue in the Midlands and Wales. So that's, I think, the developing story.
Mr Jones claimed he'd been the underdog in this contest and admitted that Rishi Sunak had barely featured in his election literature.
This isn't a general election, this is about the local impact here, that they want someone local that can represent them well, and we've given the people a vote, they will choose.
That sounds like a no. Was Rishi Sunak on your leaflets?
There was lots of people on my leaflet.
Besides Labour's victory in the by-election here in Blackpool, the party also made gains overnight in local government elections throughout England. But the really big results in the mayoral elections will not be declared until later today and tomorrow. The local election results included Labour winning Rushmore in Hampshire for the first time. Labour won Hartlepool, regaining ground where the party suffered a humiliation in a by-election 3 years ago. Labour also won Thurrock, one of its top targets. The Tories held Broxbourne, while Labour held Sunderland. But in better news for the Conservatives, they held on to Harlow, where Sir Keir had campaigned on the eve of polling day. But the Labour leader claimed the Blackpool South triumph was a seismic win, and, he claimed, the most important result of the night. John Craig, Sky News, Blackpool.
Well, let's take you live now to Blackpool. We can speak to our political correspondent, Rob Powell, who's there for us this morning. Hello to you, Rob. A really big win for Labour there, then.
Yeah, absolutely huge. I think Labour were pretty certain of taking Blackpool South. The question was the size of the win, and I think it was at the upper end of expectations. In terms of the movement of votes, the swing from Tory to Labour, it's up there with some of the bigger by-election wins they have ever had, certainly post-war. And what you're seeing is a consistency of those big wins coming in the last 18 months. And I think if you're the Tory party and Rishi Sunak, that's what worries you, because the last time that happened was in the run-up to 1997, and we all know what happened there. In terms of what motivated this, why did people vote for Labour and put Labour back in Blackpool South? Well, I was spent all afternoon here yesterday, and frankly, you hear the same thing that you hear in many of the other by-election wins that Labour have taken, but also other opposition parties have taken. People are just fed up. People are fed up of some of the chaos we've seen in government. One person described what happened with Boris Johnson and Liz Truss as a shambles, that she kept looking at what was going on with prime ministers leaving office and saying another one bites the dust. I think more than that, though, sort of domestic pressures were what were weighing on people. The NHS, inflation, cost of living, a sense that everything's getting more expensive, difficulties getting somewhere to live. And I think all of those factors are felt especially acutely in Blackpool, somewhere that does have high levels of deprivation. Yes, the individual factors around this by-election were brought up. Scott Benson, the Tory MP, leaving after a lobbying sting. You've got Mark Menzies caught up in another scandal just south of here as well. But I don't think those individual factors can really explain away this result. I think it's going to be interesting to see how Labour sort of handle this. You had one former Labour advisor, John McTiernan, on overnight saying this all indicates that Sir Keir Starmer is going to get a bigger landslide than Tony Blair got in '97. I think they'll be reluctant to go that far. I don't think they want any kind of complacency to seep in. But I think another big takeaway from here is what happened with reform. I was talking to the Reform candidate here yesterday, and he was very confident, saying that he thought he could take the seat. I mean, I think that was always fanciful, but a second place was really their aim. They'll be disappointed they didn't get that, but it does show that Reform are predominantly damaging the Tories, and in places like this, Tory-Labour marginals, that is only good news for Sir Keir Starmer.
OK, Rob, thanks very much indeed. And just to remind everyone that there is counting still going on up and down the country in these council elections. Only about a third of the results are already in. And if you want to keep track of what's going on, you can look at the bottom of the screen and you can see that we've got loads of information there on the results as they come in, the state of the parties, what's happened to individual councils and candidates as well. So keep an eye on that all the time, because things are changing. In the meantime, though, let's bring in our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coes. He's going to be with me throughout the morning this morning, which is great. Hi, Sam. Let's start talking about Blackpool South, first of all. That's a huge win for Labour, isn't it? Just how important will it be for them?
That's right, Anna. Look, I think Blackpool South will be emblematic of some of the stories we're going to be telling you all the way through the day. Effectively, quite an early stage of counting with hundreds of different races going on. The big, clearest story that we have had overnight is of Tory collapse. Look, just look at that Blackpool South result that's on your screen at the moment. It is actually a 26% swing, percentage point swing from the Tories to Labour in what, after all, would be a key red wall constituency. This is something that was Labour up from 1997 all the way until Boris Johnson came along in 2019. The Tories took that seat, and now, look, you can see a thumping Labour win. They got over 10,000 votes. The Tories almost level pegging, as Rob Powell was just saying, with Reform on just over 3,100 votes. And it is that collapse in the Tory vote, I think, that is the thing that we're going to be talking about this morning. How bad is it? What are the implications for the Prime Minister? Look, as you look across these early results, be they in councils or even in police and crime commissioners, you're seeing the Tories losing in the north, the south, the red wall, the blue wall. That is the most important thing that we're seeing today.
Yeah, and we'll get more from you in a moment, but let's drill down into some of the details, shall we? Because Gurpreet has got more and a closer look at some of those results. Gurpreet.
Yeah, so we've only had about a third of the councils in so far. You can see some of them behind me. It's starting to change colour, our grid. And I'm going to bring you some of the results shortly. We've got some interesting, diverse stories to tell. But first of all, I want to show you the state of the parties. Labour on 319 seats so far. They've picked up 52. But as Sam was saying just there, the Conservatives are having a dismal night. They've lost 117 seats. They've got 115, the Lib Dems on 103. But we've still got a long day ahead. Only 629 of the total seats have been counted. We'll have 2,600 or thereabouts in total. I said I'll bring you some of the key results. Firstly, I want to start with Rushmore and Redditch, because these are two seats that Labour have gained directly from the Conservatives. So they'll be very happy about these two results. They're very different areas, but both important. Firstly, Redditch. Redditch, traditionally Labour, but turned Conservative in 2018. It was pretty bruising for Labour in 2021. They were reduced to just 4 seats on that council, but they have been staging a comeback. And you can see tonight they've picked up 10 seats and wrestled control directly from the Conservatives. The whole council was up for re-election, all of the seats on that council. So it provides a good temperature, a test for the Labour when it comes to how the rest of the West Midlands might vote. And that's going to be a key area of focus for both main parties at the general election. So good signs for Labour there. And then Rushmore, an army town in Hampshire. It has never been a Labour-run council in its 50-year history. So a big victory for Keir Starmer there. Conservatives had a 6-point majority on that council. Labour have overturned it, managing to do something that Tony Blair didn't manage to do in Rushmore. So another good result for Labour there. And I want to drill down into the Rushmore vote share, because one of the big things we're going to be talking about today is, OK, support for the Conservatives is falling, but is Labour able to capitalise on that? Are they able to convert those voters who have fallen out of love with the Conservatives? Or is that vote going to Reform? Is it going to the Greens, to the Lib Dems, to other independent parties? But Rushmore suggests that Labour is able to turn those voters red. You can see here that the Labour vote has spiked as the Conservative vote has fallen. But that's not necessarily the picture across the country, because if we look at places like Peterborough, Labour haven't had as much luck. And the party can't get complacent, because look at South Tyneside. Labour have held on to it, but they haven't had a great night. They've lost 10 seats on that council, largely to independent parties. And this is a good reminder about why we can't be too quick to project national narratives on to local politics, because here people are angry about their bins. Bin strikes have been plaguing this council and people are angry about it. But the Greens there have picked up 2 seats, and we're hearing that in one of those wards there's been a lot of discontent about Labour's position on the conflict in the Middle East. And that's a story that might become more prominent throughout the day, particularly in areas with higher Muslim populations, places like Walsall, places like Bolton, and also Oldham Council, which we know has fallen into no overall control. Labour have lost their majority there. The Gaza position might have something to do with that. And we can see here that Labour isn't doing so well in areas with larger Muslim populations. In areas where more than 5% of the population are Muslim, you can see their vote share has fallen by 3.3 percentage points. That is a story that might become bigger as we get more results in from places like Lancashire and the Midlands. Overall then, if we look at the tally, Labour have 18 councils. The Lib Dems on 4, Conservatives on 3. Labour have picked up 4 and Conservatives have lost 3. But as I said, it's early days. Only 35 of the 107 councils counted so far, so we've still got about 2/3 of the way to go.
Yeah, long day ahead. Lots of counting is still to be done. Gurpreet, thanks very much indeed for the moment. So let's bring Sam Coates back in. And Sam, tell us, Gurpreet's very cleverly gone through all the results for us. What does it mean then for the Tories?
Well, I think what you'll hear over the next few hours is different political parties cherry-picking the results that they think are the most important. But there is a very, very clear picture that I think is unquestionable, which is one of Tory collapse. And what you heard there from Gurpreet, which is just unarguable, is the Tories going backwards whether it's in the north, in their 2019 areas of victory, whether it's in the south, in perhaps what have long been considered Tory heartlands, the Conservatives losing councils all the way over to Labour. Often when a political party loses a council, it goes into no overall control, but you've got two examples, Redditch, south of Birmingham, and Rushmore that Gurpreet was talking about in Hampshire. Those are councils that have gone all the way. And I think that is going to strike a chord with MPs wondering, am I going to be able to cling on? And I think that that will be the discussion in coming days. Now, you want to know about benchmarks. You want to know about how serious some of these losses are. And looking specifically at the council elections, which are only one part of the overall jigsaw, our colleague who we'll hear from later, Michael Thrasher, was talking about the Tories being on course for a very bad night, consistent with what we saw this time last year when the Tories were also 20 points or so behind in the polls, losing about half their councils. Well, I can tell you right now, Anna, after a third of the councils, the Tories are losing more of them, and they're facing a threat from the Reform UK party that I think at this set of elections we're discovering is a real challenge to them. So I think it's a significant moment of danger, even if, when we hear about mayoral elections in the next 24, 48 hours, that complicates the picture and perhaps gives some comfort to Rishi Sunak.
OK, lots from you throughout the programme, Sam. For the moment, thanks very much indeed. And meanwhile, plenty of other news going on in the rest of the world as well, isn't there?
There is. Let's bring viewers up to date for you. We'll head to America because US President Joe Biden has called for order after police cleared student protesters from the University of California in Los Angeles. More than 2,000 people have been arrested in connection with pro-Palestinian protests at least 35 different institutions. Our US correspondent Mark Stone reports from Los Angeles.
Willow Brown. At the university police station, an officer calls the names of the students arrested the night before. David? Charged and released with a date in court, they're here now to collect their belongings.
All that? I don't know yet, but I assume yes.
Well, we've been here an hour or so now talking to the students as they come out. They're from all sorts of different backgrounds, different interests, an Arabic studies student, a law student. None of them want to talk to us on camera. They're worried about the legal cases that are ahead of them. But all of them speak about two things: their shock at the police tactics and their defiance in their cause. From the very heart of the protest encampment, our cameras captured the chaos.
This is absolutely ridiculous.
Officers moving in.
They're students!
Tear gas, rubber bullets, and stun grenades to disorientate. They are images which have stirred an already fevered debate about Israel and Gaza, yes, but about much more too. About America, about policing, about free speech. Is it the very essence of peaceful protest, of civil disobedience, or is it, as President Biden said, unlawful chaos? By morning, they were gone, dispersed or locked up. Order, control restored, and protest silenced. And nearby, a thread of history, a young protester embraced by an older one, a woman who had been at New York's Columbia University protests 56 years ago.
You know, the civil unrest of the students back in '68, and it continued for several years, it actually changed the course of the Vietnam War. And hopefully this is going to do the same thing. And I'm so proud of these people here. I'm so proud.
But then a conversation that hints at the wider challenges for America, because this isn't just about Gaza. He is a protester who wanted to remain anonymous, a graduate who feels politically deserted in his own country. For him, no government is better than any on offer.
We are our own support system because we can't rely on the police, we can't rely on the military to keep us safe. When we need to make our voices heard, we need to make them heard, and the only way we can do that without being repressed is by keeping each other safe. And I think that last night and the last few months have really exemplified that.
These protests are aligning a spectrum of dissent. Mark Stone, Sky News in Los Angeles.
The Foreign Secretary says Ukraine has the right to use British-supplied weapons to strike Russian targets. Speaking in Kyiv, Lord Cameron said it was Ukraine's decision on how it uses the equipment. He Visits follows the government's commitment of at least £3 billion of military support to Ukraine. 4,000 patients in England with sickle cell disease will be offered a life-changing treatment on the NHS today. The inherited blood disease affects the shape of red blood cells and their ability to function. Well, the new drug has been described as transformative and can significantly improve people's quality of life by reducing pain and increasing energy levels. Take That have become the latest stars to cancel shows at Manchester's Co-op Live Arena. The band say delays to the opening of the new arena have forced them to move their gigs this month to a different venue in the city. China is on a mission to reach the dark side of the moon and even bring some back down to Earth. Our Asia correspondent Nicole Johnson is in Beijing this morning. Very good morning to you, Nicole. So just give us a rundown of what's going to happen today.
Well, this rocket is due to take off a few hours from now from Hainan Island in southern China. It's a really big day for China's space program. It has an ambitious plan to get its own astronauts on the moon by 2030, and this is one of the steps in that process. If everything goes to plan for China, it would be the first country to send a lunar probe to the far side of the moon. That's the side that we can't see from Earth, collect samples, and then to return them to Earth. Now, it is doing this by also sending some equipment from a number of different countries, including the European Space Agency, but not the United States. There is no cooperation between China and NASA. And NASA has really been increasing some of its language regarding China's space program, saying that it's a military program. China, though, has rebutted all of that. It says that it's for peaceful purposes.
OK, for now, thank you, Nicole.
Well, let's get more reaction to all the results coming in overnight. Here with us is the Conservative Party chairman, Richard Holden. So a very good morning to you. Thanks very much indeed for coming in. How are you feeling about the results so far? They're not looking too good, are they? There's that Blackpool South by-election loss and you're losing council seats up and down the country.
Well, look, you know, it's coming off a difficult, very high watermark set of elections in 2021 where back then my own council, Durham, was also up for election and Labour lost control of it for the first time in over 100 years in 2021. And obviously that was the time we also won the Hartlepool by-election with the vaccine bounce election. So, it's unusual for a party in government to gain seats like we did in 2021. Obviously, that's not the case today, and I do feel sorry for a lot of my Conservative colleagues who I've been out campaigning with across the country over the last few weeks and months who haven't managed to hold their seats.
But this is looking particularly bad, isn't it? I mean, let's take Blackpool South, shall we? Labour has won that with a swing of 26%, over 26%. And this is one of the seats that went Conservative in 2019. That must make you really worried about all those red wall seats and how they could go back to Labour at a general election.
Well, obviously, it's a by-election with a lower turnout than you'd expect in a general election on one side. But, I don't want to see us losing any seats. I think in this one there was a particular circumstances of not only the previous MP having been forced to stand down, but also during the campaign, the neighbouring seat, the former Conservative MP also had to have the whip withdrawn, not exactly the ideal circumstances for a campaign for who is a great candidate in David Jones up there, who I went to see a couple of times during the campaign. But I think it also shows that, where Reform split votes, Labour get through as well. I think that's pretty clear in some of the other local government results we've seen tonight as well. But obviously not something I'd like to see repeated.
But Rick Holden, doesn't the Blackpool South result blow a big hole in the Tories' argument that people don't want to switch directly from the Conservative Party to Labour? That's exactly what they did in near record numbers.
I mean, did they? Because I thought Labour get more votes than they did in 2019, Sam?
They got, on a lower turnout, they got a much bigger proportion of the votes.
No, I don't disagree.
But
the question, they didn't get more votes, I don't think.
But on a expected lower by-election turnout.
No, I understand.
But you've also got the problem that...
Difficult to show direct switches in that case, though.
But you've also got the problem that quite clearly Reform UK, at this set of elections, has eaten into your vote. that you've got Reform UK snapping at the heels of the Tories. They're no longer a theoretical thing in polls. You see them, whether it's in the by-election, whether it's in council elections, harming your voter base.
There's no doubt about that. And as I said in answer to the previous question, there's no doubt that votes for reform will help Labour in a general election scenario. There's no doubt about that. And I think when people do see that, the reality of that, as we're seeing in several different areas tonight, then that's, people will also understand that, I think, even more viscerally than they have that sort of perhaps theoretical argument before. What I would also say, though, is there have been some areas where, we've held out against quite big pressure from Labour. We gained a seat in Newcastle upon Tyne for the first time in 32 years. Doc Anand, somebody who campaigned for me back in 2019 and campaigned in those local elections I was talking about in Durham in 2021. Great to see him elected after fighting that Gosforth seat for many years in a row. He's finally got over the line there. Places like Fareham as well, we held down in Hampshire. But there's no point in trying to overtalk it. This is going to be a tough night for the Conservatives and a tough couple of days, because we will see some of those results dripping out over the weekend as well. And we'll have to, it's quite early days. I think we've only seen about a quarter of councils declared so far, a couple of PCCs, none of the big mayoralties. So we'll have to see as well what happens over the next few days, because I think the story could change a bit depending on what happens in those other results as well.
You picked out Hampshire as an example of some success, but there's an example of real failure in Hampshire as well, in Rushmore, isn't there? That's gone Labour for the first time ever. Not even Blair managed that.
Yes.
And you're losing in the north as well, in Hartlepool. It's across the country.
Well, as I said, we also gained to see it in Newcastle, but it is a patchy picture, but generally, as I said, coming off very good election results in 2021, where we'd gained after 11 years in government. Obviously not now. So it is a tough night for the Conservatives.
So what do you do about it? Are you going to change? Is Rishi Sunak going to listen and alter course, or should your parliamentary colleagues think about maybe putting in letters of no confidence?
Well, what we have been doing, certainly, certainly not what I was saying on the doorstep was that they wanted to see more change in the Conservative Party. What they want to see us doing is focusing on getting those flights off to Rwanda. We've got 9 to 11 weeks now before we're hoping to see some of those taking off. I think they want to see that strong line on illegal migration. In stark contrast, by the way, what we've seen from Labour in the last couple of days, actually, which is to have...
just concentrating on the message, the message from you seems to be, we hear the catastrophic results for the Tories, so we're going to give you more of the same.
No, that's not true, Sam. We haven't seen, we've only just got that legislation through the House. We're seeing it strongly opposed at every stage by Labour. Now they're opposing it and saying they would totally reverse it. So, that is a very clear dividing line between us and them. In another space, we've only just started to see those tax cuts come through after we've had to spend a huge amount of money to support families and businesses across the country during the pandemic, and then again through the energy price crisis following Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine and the war in the Middle East, which has left taxes higher than we'd like. But we're now starting to move to a position where we're cutting taxes for working people. There's only just starting to filter through £900 a year for the average person. But at the same time, we're trying to we've also protected pensioners with our triple.
Are you confident there won't be a challenge from parliamentary colleagues?
Look, I think if parliamentary colleagues need to look at this and see, actually, these results, and we also need to see, wait through the weekend as
they'll be seeing their seats going at a general election.
I don't think these results show that. I think what these results are is typical for a government in mid-term, coming off a very high level of election results like we saw in 2021.
If you lose the mayoralties in Tees Valley and West Midlands, though, that could be the trigger, couldn't it, for people to put in votes?
Well, look, the Tees Valley mayoralty, Labour need to win every seat in Tees Valley. Every single parliamentary constituency just become the largest party. This is a massive test for Keir Starmer. You're right to point out how electorally important it is. He's been there multiple times himself, where Streeting's been up there a lot. One of Keir's senior advisors, Jenny Chapman, is the former MP for Darlington, now who he put in the House of Lords. This is a big personal thing for him, especially especially given the Hartlepool by-election result in 2021, which was his first real challenge as Labour leader. You know, there's a lot riding on Teesside as a result this time. We'll have to see. Ben Houchin is for a hard campaign. Some of the local MPs up there have been fighting it hard as well. But you're right, it is a massive test for the Labour leader.
We're completely out of time, but I want to ask you, when do you want the general election then? Do you want it sooner?
My job is to get the party ready for the general election whenever the Prime Minister wants to call it, and also get us ready for things like party conference as well. And so there's a lot on my plate at the moment.
Are you ready for a general election in the summer? If it needs to be?
Whenever the Prime Minister calls a general election, we will be ready for it. But I think
you're ready for a summer election.
The Prime Minister has also made it. Sam, stop trying to put words in my mouth.
I'm asking you a question. Are you ready for a summer election?
We are ready for an election, as ready as we can be, whenever it is called. And what I would also say, though, is that it's also been very clear that the PM said this election will be called in the second half of the year and most likely in the autumn. And I think that's where we're likely to see.
OK, we really do have to let you go now.
No, thank you guys for having me on.
Thanks for joining us. Good to see you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Do stay with us. We've got lots coming up for you here on The Breakfast Show. We're going to be asking Sky News' elections analyst, Professor Michael Thrasher, about what this morning's results could mean for the general election. Also ahead, we've got the sport for you with Jackie, of course, and why Tiger Woods can start preparing for next month's US Open despite failing to qualify. Jackie will have all the sport for you in a moment. Welcome back. Sam's still with us, of course, and we've also been joined by our election guru, Michael Thrasher, and what's been a very big night of results, still rolling in, we should say. And Michael, good to see you. This is the last big test of public opinion before the general election, isn't it? So we're going to be scrutinising it particularly closely. Yeah. So what have we learnt so far?
Well, what we're learning is that it's quite complicated to explain. And the issue that we have here is that we can compare a party's performance according to whether it did well in 2021 or how it did in 2023. And the point is that if you use the picture in 2021, which, let's remind ourselves, the Conservatives did spectacularly well, one of its best performances. If you look at the change in vote share since then, the Conservative vote has collapsed.
I think we can see it as well. We should be able to see a graphic while you talk about it.
The Conservative vote has collapsed and Labour has risen because we're comparing with 2021. And some people would say that's the wrong comparison to make. And because these are local council elections, we can actually take the same wards and look what has happened not with 2021, but comparing what happened in those wards in 2023. And it's an entirely different picture, isn't it? The Conservative vote has fallen fraction, but so the Labour vote has risen minutely. So the conclusion from that is, from the first graph, the Conservatives have done terrible, and this is a really bad performance just before the general election. If you look at the second graph, the Conservatives can say, well, it's bad, but, you know, Labour are not making progress since last year.
We just heard from the Conservative Party chairman, Rick Holden, who called this just the kind of normal thing you see in midterms. Is what we're looking at on the screen right now just a normal midterm result for a Conservative for a governing incumbent party?
No, the second graph is really serious, and my colleague Will Jennings has done estimates for the Leave vote at ward level. So this is very small level analysis, and essentially the story of this graph is very bad news for the Conservatives, because their general election victory in 2019 was built on winning the support of people who had strongly voted Leave in the referendum. And that picture shows that in areas that voted most strongly for Leave, the Conservative vote has fallen almost 18 percentage points. And that was the coalition that put Johnson into Downing Street, gave the Conservatives an 80-seat majority. And what it seems to suggest is that that vote is leaving the Conservatives. Some of it is going to Labour, but almost certainly, at a general election, some of it would go to Reform.
Mike, I'm just interested in understanding those charts that we've just looked at and having a look at them again. Clearly, it shows a drop in the Tory vote and only a marginal increase in the Labour vote compared to last year, although, you know, the Labour Party were 20 points ahead also last year as well. Isn't the bottom line that in a general election you're either going to have a Conservative or a Labour Prime Minister coming out the other end of it? And even if Labour aren't advancing on where they were a year ago, this is all actually very good for them.
Yes, it's good for them, even if they're not making real progress themselves, not, say, achieving what they're doing in the opinion polls. But it's good for them because if the Conservatives fall as low as these council elections so far appear to be telling us, then we're in a situation that we were in 1997, where the Conservative vote fell so far down that they were almost annihilated. And that the same fate awaits the Conservatives at the next general election if their vote slides this far below, say, 30% in the general election.
Does it also matter where Labour are picking up votes? They say they don't mind so much about national swings as marginal seats. How are they doing in those areas? And what do these results tell us about their prospects for general elections?
There is some evidence to suggest that in places, for example, like Plymouth, where the Conservatives have done spectacularly badly because they cut the trees down in the city centre and the voters haven't forgiven us for that. But it's repeated this year. But the Labour vote appears to be better distributed in the Plymouth Moor View, which is the one seat in Plymouth that they don't have, and it's less robust in the seat that they already have. So there's a sense in which it suggests to me that Labour actually knows what it's doing in terms of concentrating its vote. Rushmore, a council that it never controlled in 51 years, they've taken control. And again, it suggests that they're capable of identifying places that are where the Conservatives are vulnerable and really campaigning strongly in those areas. However, we've got a lot of results.
Yes, still to go.
Left to come. Michael, I'm wondering, looking across all the results that we've had so far, and there's a long way to go, whether actually one of the biggest big shifts in this set of elections is that Reform UK, the party of Richard Tice, perhaps Nigel Farage, Lee Anderson, who we'll hear from in a second, has sort of become real tonight. You look at the vote share in the by-election in Blackpool South, you look at the way that Reform UK's vote made inroads into the Tory vote in Hartlepool, even if they didn't win any seats. Is this the set of elections that we can declare Reform UK a serious threat to Tory performance?
It certainly does, but we have to remember that Reform is putting candidates, and cleverly so, they're putting candidates in areas where they would get maximum publicity for it. So, for example, they're putting candidates forward in the mayoral elections, right? So it only requires one candidate, but they're appealing to many voters. Or they're putting candidates in areas like Sunderland, like Hartlepool, like Walsall, where they feel that they can harvest Conservative votes in those areas and do maximum damage to the Conservatives. So it's quite a clever strategy. But whether in a general election, if they were fielding hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of candidates, they would do that well across the country, is open to question.
OK, well, Michael, it's always fascinating to get your thoughts and your analysis on the results so far. Thanks very much indeed. So we're talking about Reform. Let's talk to Reform, shall we? We can speak now to Lee Anderson, who's Reform UK MP for Ashfield. Very good morning to you. Thanks so much for talking to us. Let's talk about Blackpool South to begin with. Were you satisfied with Reform's performance there? Reform coming in third, just behind the Tories. Were you a bit disappointed with that?
No, I mean, I was hoping for around 15% of the vote share. I think we got 16.9%, nearly 17% of the vote share in Blackpool, which is above the national average polling at the moment for Reform. So it shows that we're moving in the right direction. Blackpool was always going to be a difficult place, a low turnout, about 30%, I think it was. I was knocking doors up there last week, I think it was, and there wasn't much appetite for a by-election. But, if we're polling at around 17% in an area like that, that's very encouraging. We look at the polls at the moment, we're going up and the Conservative Party is coming down. We're sort of going to meet at some point. Well, we've already met it in places in the North and in the Midlands. But I think, with a general election probably 4 or 5 months away, then we're going to surpass them. And in places like Ashfield and in the North East we saw last night, we're going to be the main opposition.
Back in January, before you defected from the Tories, you said that Reform wasn't the answer because it left the door open to Sir Keir Starmer. And doesn't Blackpool South show that's true? You're making it easier for Labour by taking votes away from the Tories.
It absolutely doesn't show it's true. The polls have changed dramatically since January. And if you look at the results in Blackpool, you see that Labour got over 50% of the vote. So if you lumped all the other parties together, Labour still would have won. So that argument doesn't hold any water at all.
Lee Anderson, it's Sam Coates here. But when you look across the local council elections, places like Hartlepool, you clearly made inroads into the Tory vote share. A lot of the reason that in Hartlepool the Tories lost was because of the impact of Reform. Even if you don't win seats, you are making the Tories' job harder, and that does open the door to Labour.
Well, there's no difference, Sam, at the moment, in my opinion, and many ex-Tory voters are leaving in their droves. There's no difference at all between the Labour Party and the Conservative Party. And quite frankly, a lot of Conservative voters have had enough. They're saying, enough's enough. We've had 14 years, which the Labour Party bang on about. The last four years or so, they've just not delivered. And I was part of that, and I hold my hands up. So people are saying so what if Labour get in? That's what they're saying. And that's why more and more people are turning to Reform. And come the general election, if this trajectory in these national polls continues in the way it is doing at the moment, then people like me are going to win my seat, and we're going to win seats, in the North and in the Midlands and around the country. So it's a poor argument for the Conservative Party not to campaign on their track record of delivery, and all they're doing is campaigning on saying if you vote Reform, you get Labour. That's a very, very poor argument at the moment.
Lee Anderson, when you watch the collapse in the Tory vote, do you think it serves you right?
No, I'm not. I'm not going to be spiteful like that, Sam. To be honest, I've got a lot of good friends still in the Conservative Party. There's some good MPs, some of the MPs that I used to sit with, and unfortunately, I look at some of my old colleagues, the proper Conservatives in the Red Wall and other areas around the country, and sadly, they're going to lose a seat at the next election. And yes, reform may play a part in that, but we live in a democratic society. Nobody has the right to be there because they're in a particular party. You know, if the party messes up, then unfortunately, at the end of the 5 years, you're going to lose your seat, and that's just the game we're in.
Are you worried about losing your seat, though? Because Blackpool South was part of that wave of seats that went Tory in 2019. Are you worried about your ability in Ashfield to hang on to your seat as well?
My seat for granted. You know, I'm from here. I'm born and bred. I've been a councillor here, been an MP here for the last 4.5 years. I've always lived here. I'm embedded in the community, and you know, it's a Brexit area. I campaign for Brexit. I'm pretty much saying on a weekly basis these so-called outrageous things I say in Parliament every week. They're not outrageous to the people of Ashfield. And when I go out and about in Ashfield, in the pubs and the clubs and the shops, you know, lots of people come up to me and say, "Lee, keep on saying what you're saying." We've had over 300 people join the Reform Party in Ashfield. That's twice as many as what's in the Conservative Party in Ashfield, and about the same as what's in the Labour Party in Ashfield. So the message is loud and clear here. They want reform.
Lee Anderson, do you think that the Tories would be in a better position if they moved to the right a bit, they pledged to pull out of the European Convention on Human Rights? Do you think the Tories would be in a better position if they ditched Rishi Sunak?
I think what it is, Sam, I think the public's already made their mind up. I think Rishi Sunak could fly over the UK tonight in an helicopter and drop £1 million down every chimney, and they would still vote him out come October.
Oh, very quickly, Lee, I was going to ask you, Nigel Farage, is he coming back or not? I mean, what difference would that make to your party if he did?
Well, I should obviously give us a bit of a rise in the polls, and membership would probably surge as well. But, you know, Nigel's keeping his cards close to his chest at the moment. I think he's in America at the moment with Donald Trump. But, you know, he's going to have a big part to play whatever he does in the next election. He's been the most influential politician over the past 30 years without actually having a seat in Parliament. But that's up to him. I think he's got a lot of things to consider, which is said publicly in the past about, you know, his age. You know, does he really want to be an MP? And it's not a bed of roses being an MP. It takes all your time up, and there's lots of stuff you do behind the scenes as well. So that's up to Nigel. But, you know, if he did come back, it'd be brilliant.
OK, well, Lee Anderson, we appreciate your time this morning. Thanks very much indeed. So Reform have really had good results so far, but whether or not they translate into seats is another question, I guess.
That's right. Look, I think Lee Anderson, whose defection from the Conservative Party will have caused much pain and whose words this morning will be followed by Tory MPs, I think, basically conceding that, yes, it might end up that there are some Tory MPs losing their seats as a result of the activities of Reform UK. I think that they are having an effect, and we're seeing that properly for the first time in this set of election results.
Yeah. Well, fascinating night, all right. Lots more to talk about throughout the morning. Do stay with us. We've got lots coming up for you, including the sport as well, and why Tiger Woods can start preparing for next month's US Open despite failing to qualify. Jackie will be here with all the sport next.
Hester and Pickle have come to visit us. Hester is 16 years old and she is living with sight loss.
Hi everyone, I'm Hester and this is my guide dog Pickle. She's amazing. She helps me cross the road, get on public transport and avoid things that might be dangerous for me.
That sounds great. And she's also cuter than a square dancing squirrel. How do I get a guide dog?
For the first time, Beano has created an audio comic where Beano readers can actually listen to the comic strip as opposed to using their eyes to look at the pictures and read it. And it's part of an exciting project that we've been involved with the charity Guide Dogs for the Blind, and we've been working on for the past few months. And it's been an absolute pleasure for us to work with two guide dog owners, Hester, who you heard there, and Alex, and their guide and buddy dogs, Chance and Pickle. It is a big change and a big project for us. but guide dogs gave us loads of assistance. And you know, we've done a lot of work on accessibility in the past, so we have audio books now that kids can buy and listen to our fiction stories and things like that. So we're always looking at ways to improve the accessibility of essentially of print, which is you know, as an old but still incredibly popular format. And it's been a massive learning experience for us. Hester and Alex are inspirational kids.
We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news. Greg Milam, Sky News, Manchester.
So it's a morning of results, political and sports.
Yeah, it was a big night last night for Aston Villa. A bad night, but also a good night. What do I mean? Well, I'll kind of explain it now. Villa's hopes of a European trophy took a huge blow last night. They lost 4-2 at home to Olympiacos in the Europa Conference League semi-final first leg. Ayoub El-Kaabi scored a hat-trick for the Greek side at Villa Park. Ollie Watkins and Moussa Diaby scored for Villa, but midfielder Douglas Luiz missed a late penalty. And Villa have it all to do in the second leg in Greece next Thursday.
Now they are favourite. Congratulations of them. They deserve to win today, the first leg, and we will try next week to come back. But of course, now they are favourite, completely favourite. We will play there, trying to show something different like tonight.
Bayer Leverkusen's unbeaten season continues. The German champions were 2-0 winners at Roma in the first leg of their Europa League semi-final. Marseille and Atalanta drew 1-1 in the other tie. So here's the good news for Aston Villa last night. They look likely to claim a Champions League place next season after top four rivals Tottenham lost at Chelsea in the Premier League. Chelsea won 2-0 at Stamford Bridge. Trevor Chabala scored the opening goal in the first half. It was an excellent header. Chelsea doubled the lead when Nicholas Jackson followed up Cole Palmer's free kick. It's the third defeat in a row for Tottenham. They stay fifth. They are 7 points behind fourth place Aston Villa. Chelsea are up to 8th. Lewis Hamilton says it would be amazing if Ferrari can sign the legendary designer Adrian Newey. Newey will leave Red Bull after 18 years in early 2025. He met with Ferrari last week to discuss the deal. Lewis Hamilton will move to Ferrari next season, this we know, and wants Newey alongside him.
I think he would be an amazing addition. I think they've already got a great team. They're already making huge progress, strides forwards. Their car's quicker this year. But yeah, it'd be a privilege to work with him.
Luke Littler has sealed a spot at the end-of-season Premier League darts playoffs. Littler got a fourth nightly win of the season and a second in a row as he beat Rob Cross in the Aberdeen final. There are 2 nights of the regular season left before finals night at the O2 in London on the 23rd of May. It's so hard to believe it's his first season in professional darts. Brilliant. Tiger Woods will play at next month's US Open Championship despite failing to qualify. Woods has accepted a special exemption to play at the 124th US Open at Pinehurst No. 2 in North Carolina. He last won the US Open back in 2008. Woods had failed to qualify for the first time in his professional career, with injury limiting his playing time. The Professional Cricketers Association say they're heartbroken over the death of 20-year-old Worcestershire bowler Josh Baker. Baker played 47 times for Worcestershire in all formats and represented England at under-19 level. Worcestershire Chief Executive Ashley Giles says Baker was an integral part of the cricket family. Both semi-finals are looked at 4 frames all after the first sessions at the World Snooker Championships. The 2015 champion Stuart Bingham led Jack Jones 3-0 before Jones fought back to level the match. It's also 4 frames all in the second semi between David Gilbert and Kieran Wilson. First to 17 frames will reach the final. Wigan Warriors have moved joint top of the Super League. They came from 8-0 down to beat Catalan's Dragons 38 at the DW Stadium. Wigan scored 5 tries, including this from Liam Farrell, to bring up the 150th of his career. Iga Świątek is through to the Madrid Open final. The world #1, who's at the bottom of your picture, got a straight sets victory over Madison Keys in just 71 minutes, and that sets up a repeat of last year's final against the defending champion Aryna Sabalenka. In the men's draw, Daniil Medvedev is out. The world #4 had to retire injured after the opening set of his quarter-final with Yuri Lehechka. Meanwhile, Britain's Jamie Murray is into the semis of the men's doubles with partner Michael Venus. Got lots of builds up to the Miami Sprint shootout over on Sports News. We'll be back later on. Any thoughts on the sports bulletin, Sam?
That there are lots of teams competing hard. There's a long way to go. We need to see the results before we can comment.
Sounds exactly like what you say about the local elections as well.
But what we can tell you about the local elections after the first third of council results in the one by-election is that the Tory vote has been collapsing. If we had one benchmark, is the Conservatives are losing more than the half of the councillors they put up. That is bad. More from Labour in the next hour.
Yeah, that's right. We're going to be talking to Pat McFadden and get Labour's reaction to the results so far. Are they picking up all those lost Tory seats? We'll find out after the break. Stay with us. Hello, a very good morning. It's 8 o'clock. Coming up on today's show, the results roll in from the local elections across England and Wales, and it's a big night for Labour with victory in the Blackpool South by-election.
So Keir Starmer is delighted, calling it a seismic win. We'll get reaction from Labour's national campaign coordinator in the next few minutes.
The Tory party chairman admitted on this programme it had been a tough night.
And in sport, Aston Villa are beaten 4-2 at home by Olympiacos in the first leg of their Europa Conference League semi-final.
It's a busy day. It's Friday, the 3rd of May.
I declare that Christopher Paul Webb is duly elected as the Member of Parliament for the Blackpool South constituency.
Keir Starmer hails a seismic win for Labour in Blackpool South with a swing of more than 26% from the Conservatives. The Tories scraped into second place, just 117 votes ahead of Reform. Gains for Labour in the council elections too, making its biggest advance in areas that voted for Brexit. In other news, US President Joe Biden calls for order after police clear student protests in Los Angeles.
And Tottenham's hopes of Champions League football next season are hanging by a thread after defeat at Chelsea in the Premier League.
Hello, a very good morning. Thanks for joining us here on The Breakfast Show. So, results have been rolling in from the local elections in England and Wales, as well as the Blackpool South by-election. What they show so far is a big night for Labour and losses everywhere for the Conservatives. Well, our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, is here with me throughout the morning to help us make sense of what's happening. And Sam, with you very shortly. In the meantime, though, in Blackpool South, Labour's Chris Webb will become the area's new MP. He won more than 10,000 votes. That gave him a majority of 7,500 over the Conservatives on a huge swing of 26%. The Tories scraped into second place, just 117 votes ahead of Reform. Our chief political correspondent, John Craig, reports from Blackpool.
I declare that Christopher Paul Webb is duly elected as the Member of Parliament for the Blackpool South constituency.
An emphatic victory for Labour's Chris Webb in Blackpool South. A majority of more than 7,500 and a 26% swing. Enough to put Sir Keir Starmer in Downing Street.
People are fed up because nothing seems to work anymore. Hard up because of the Conservative cost of living crisis. But instead of giving up, they got up and voted for change with Labour. Only Keir Starmer's Labour Party has the vision and the ideas to make life better for everyone in our country.
The Conservatives' David Jones was only narrowly ahead of Reform UK's Mark Butcher in second place.
We're the party on the up, and what's rapidly becoming clear, you're seeing it in some council elections elsewhere in the North East, is that we're becoming the real opposition in the North to the Labour Party, and I think that will continue in the Midlands and Wales. So that's, I think, the developing story.
Mr Jones claimed he'd been the underdog in this contest and admitted that Rishi Sunak had barely featured in his election literature.
This isn't a general election, this is about the local impact here, that they want someone local that can represent them well, and yeah, we've given the people a vote, they will choose.
That sounds like a no. Was Rishi Sunak on your leaflets?
There was lots of people on my leaflet.
Besides Labour's victory in the by-election here in Blackpool, the party also made gains overnight in local government elections throughout England. But the really big results in the mayoral elections will not be declared until later today and tomorrow. The local election results included Labour winning Rushmore in Hampshire for the first time. Labour won Hartlepool, regaining ground where the party suffered a humiliation in a by-election 3 years ago. Labour also won Thurrock, one of its top targets. The Tories held Broxbourne, while Labour held Sunderland. But in better news for the Conservatives, they held on to Harlow, where Sir Keir had campaigned on the eve of polling day. But the Labour leader claimed the Blackpool South triumph was a seismic win, and, he claimed, the most important result of the night. John Craig, Sky News, Blackpool.
Well, let's take you live now to Blackpool and speak to our political correspondent, Rob Powell, who's there. So, Rob, a really big win for Labour then overnight.
Yeah, and a punishing loss for the Conservatives that worryingly as well mirrors some other awful results in by-elections over the last 18 months. Why did it happen? Well, I was here all afternoon yesterday talking to people, and you hear what you hear in many by-election areas that have gone Labour recently. People are just fed up of the chaos we've had in government recently, fed up with domestic pressures, the state of the NHS, the cost of living, trying to get a suitable place to live. I was talking to some younger people on the beachfront yesterday who said a load of money gets ploughed into the tourist areas on the front in Blackpool, but everything else is essentially left to wither. Also, I think reform is an interesting story coming out of Blackpool. Talking to the local candidate yesterday, he was very confident. He thought he was going to get second. At one point, he even thought he could win the seat here. I think that was always fanciful. And I think, actually, despite putting in a strong performance, they might be a bit disappointed by how this has turned out. The fact that they didn't take second. They had a strong local candidate, someone with good local pull. They had a lot of sort of scandal around the circumstances in which this by-election came about. And they still weren't able to get into second. As for the Tories, they say that, look, those local factors, those factors connected to Scott Benton, the outgoing Tory MP, and Mark Menzies, another scandal-ridden MP just down the coast, were relevant here. I don't think that explains away the size of the result here. What we are seeing is consistent big swings in by-elections going from the Tories to Labour. And whilst it's debatable whether this is a sort of classic red wall Labour heartland seat, what's undeniable is that it is somewhere that was won by Boris Johnson in 2019 and now has been won back by Labour in an emphatic fashion. I think looking ahead to the general election, that's what will really, really worry Rishi Sunak and everyone in the Conservative Party.
OK, Rob, thanks very much indeed. And just before I chat to Sam and get his reaction, just want to explain what's going on at the bottom of your screen. There are votes still being counted now. We've only had a third of the results so far. So if you want to check in on what's going on, you can just look at the bottom of the screen and you'll get an overall state of the parties. You can see how different council results are falling and how many seats each of the party has won or lost. So keep an eye on that while we hear from our various guests, including Sam Coates, our Deputy Political Editor. A quick thought on Blackpool South. A really big win for Labour there.
That's right. I think there is a big picture emerging from all of the results that we had, of which Blackpool South is probably the most important so far, which is that there is an unwinding of the political coalition that Boris Johnson knitted together in order to win the 2019 general election. Back then, 4 years ago, you saw an extraordinary combination of effects, be it Leave voters wanting Brexit to be done, people that didn't like Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party, and Blackpool South being potentially one end of a red wall. You're seeing Hartlepool at the other end of the red wall. The Tory vote is tanking. They're losing more numbers of councillors, I think, even than the benchmarks that we set. That is the biggest, clearest picture from today's local and by-election results. OK, back to you in a moment, Sam. Let's drill into some of the detail a little bit further, shall we? Gurpreet's got a closer look at the results.
Yeah, we've had a decent chunk of the votes in so far. About a third of the councils have been counted, and it's telling us an interesting and diverse story across the country. And I want to get into some of those stories in a second. But before I do that, let me just show you the state of the parties. Well, Labour on 319 seats. They've picked up 52. But the Conservatives, look at that. We're hearing it all night. They've had a dismal, dismal evening. They've lost 122 seats so far. They're on 117 and expect that to rise. The benchmarks that Sam were talking about have the Conservatives losing about 500 seats, but it could be even worse for them. And we've still got a long way to go in terms of seat declarations. I said I wanted to bring you a couple of stories, and two of the results here are interesting for similar reasons. Firstly, Rushmore and Redditch. Both of these Labour have gained from the Conservatives directly. So a decent result, a very good result for Labour. Let me start with Redditch. Now, Redditch is interesting because it's traditionally been Labour, but it turned Conservative in 2018, really bruising for Labour in 2021. They were reduced to a humiliating 4 seats, but they've been staging a comeback. Have a look at this. They've picked up 10 seats in Redditch. It's an all-council election. All the seats were up for grabs. It means it offered the Labour Party a good test of the temperature in the Midlands vicinity, which we know is going to be a key battleground in the general election. And then Rushmore in Hampshire, an army town. It has never, ever, ever been a Labour-run council in its 50-year history. Keir Starmer tonight has managed to do something that Blair couldn't do. He's turned that council into a Labour council, overturning a Conservative majority of 6. And I want to drill down into the Rushmore vote share, because one of the things we keep hearing tonight is, OK, so the Tory vote is collapsing, but is Labour able to convert those voters, to seduce voters who have fallen out of love with the Conservatives? Or is that vote fracturing? Is it going to parties like Reform? Is it going to the Lib Dems? And this shows us, actually, Labour is managing to convert Conservative voters. But that's not the case everywhere in the country. If we look at Peterborough, for example, that's not happening. So overall, let's take a look at the overall picture. Labour, 18 councils, Conservatives on just 3. But as I said, we're still counting. Only about a third of the councils counted so far.
Right.
Gurpreet, thanks very much indeed. Plenty more detail coming from Gurpreet a little bit later on. In the meantime, let's bring Sam Coates, our Deputy Political Editor, back in for a kind of overview of what's been going on so far. And Sam, what do you think about what this means for the Tories?
Well, I think what you saw from Gurpreet just there illustrates the bigger picture, which is that Boris Johnson knitted together quite a clever electoral coalition in 2019, and the Tories are losing that. So one of the big pictures and trends of tonight is the Tories going backwards, quite a long way backwards in areas that voted Leave. I think you saw a bit of that in the Hartlepool by-election, for example. Another big problem for the Tories is the advance of Reform. For the first time at this set of elections, I think Reform, which was a sort of a polling sort of feature, has now translated its support into real votes that clearly harm the Conservative Party. And in the last hour, we had the Tory party chairman, Rick Holden, admit that. And the race for Downing Street is a 2-horse race. So if the Tories go down, then Labour is in a better position. And they have also made strong gains in some parts of the country. I think there'll be a few areas of the country where they're a little bit less happy, and indeed they did lose Oldham Council. One of the bigger problems we'll be talking about later is whether they've lost some of the areas of higher Muslim population, perhaps in relation to what's been going on in Gaza. But I think Labour will be happy, I think, with the direction of lots of areas. They'll be able to point to councils in lots of parts of the country where previously they weren't doing well, but now they can say that they're making gains.
Well, yes, and what does it mean for them ultimately? Because clearly they want to take from the local elections signs that they can relax about getting a majority in the general election. Is it possible to deduce anything at this stage?
Well, I think that there are areas where they'll say that they did well, but there are places like Peterborough where they were hoping to take the council, or Harlow, where they were hoping to take the council, and that hasn't quite happened. Keir Starmer went twice to Harlow during the local election campaign and told my colleague Beth Rigby that these are exactly the areas that we need to win, then didn't win the council outright. So there'll be a little bit of questions around that. I think it's probably important not to overplay that at the moment, because in the end, a Tory collapse will always benefit the principal opposition, which is, of course, Labour.
And we spoke to Lee Anderson, didn't we, in the last hour from Reform. To what extent might Reform be helping Labour, do you think?
Well, I think even though they would like to think they aren't, because like the Tories, they're a fellow party that come at politics from the right, that is inescapably the lesson of Reform, which is overwhelmingly votes for Reform come from Tories, not from Labour. And bluntly, Lee Anderson doesn't think that there's anything Rishi Sunak can do about it. Here's the grab.
I think what it is, Sam, I think the public's already made their mind up. I think Rishi Sunak could fly over the UK tonight in an helicopter and drop £1 million down every chimney, and they would still vote him out come October.
More in sorrow than in anger. What Lee Anderson says will hurt the Tory party, though.
OK. Plenty more from you later. Sam, thanks very much indeed. Let's fill everybody in on the rest of the day's news, shall we, Lou?
Yes, thank you very much. Bit of a breather for you.
Very true.
We'll move on to the United States because US President Joe Biden has called for order after police cleared student protesters from the University of California in Los Angeles. More than 2,000 people have been arrested in connection with the pro-Palestinian protests at least 35 different institutions. Our US correspondent Mark Stone reports from Los Angeles.
Willow Brown. At the university police station, an officer calls the names of the students arrested the night before.
David?
Charged and released with a date in court, they're here now to collect their belongings.
All that?
I don't know yet, but I assume yes.
Well, we've been here an hour or so now talking to the students as they come out. They're from all sorts of different backgrounds, different interests. An Arabic studies student, a law student. None of them want to talk to us on camera. They're worried about the legal cases that are ahead of them. But all of them speak about two things: their shock at the police tactics and their defiance in their cause. From the very heart of the protest encampment, our cameras captured the chaos.
This is absolutely ridiculous.
Officers moving in.
They're students!
Tear gas, rubber bullets, and stun grenades to disorientate. They are images which have stirred an already fevered debate about Israel and Gaza, yes, but about much more too. About America, about policing, about free speech. Is it the very essence of peaceful protest, of civil disobedience, or is it, as President Biden said, unlawful chaos? By morning, they were gone, dispersed or locked up. Order, control restored, and protest silenced. And nearby, a thread of history, a young protester embraced by an older one, a woman who had been at New York's Columbia University protests 56 years ago.
You know, the civil unrest of the students back in '68, and it continued for several years, it actually changed the course of the Vietnam War. And hopefully this is going to do the same thing. And I'm so proud of these people here. I'm so proud.
But then a conversation that hints at the wider challenges for America, because this isn't just about Gaza. He is a protester who wanted to remain anonymous, a graduate who feels politically deserted in his own country. For him, no government is better than any on offer.
We are our own support system because we can't rely on the police, we can't rely on the military to keep us safe. When we need to make our voices heard, we need to make them heard, and the only way we can do that without being repressed is by keeping each other safe. And I think that last night and the last few months have really exemplified that.
These protests are aligning a spectrum of dissent. Mark Stone, Sky News in Los Angeles.
The Foreign Secretary says Ukraine has the right to use British-supplied weapons to strike Russian targets. Speaking in Kyiv, Lord Cameron said it was Ukraine's decision on how it uses the equipment. His visit follows the government's commitment of at least £3 billion of military support to Ukraine. 4,000 patients in England with sickle cell disease will be offered a life-changing treatment from the NHS today. The inherited blood disease affects the shape of red blood cells and their ability to function, while the new drug has been described as transformative and can significantly improve people's quality of life by reducing pain and increasing energy levels. Take That have become the latest stars to cancel shows at Manchester's Co-op Live Arena. The bands say delays to the opening of the new arena have forced them to move their gigs this month to a different venue in the city. China is on a mission to reach the dark side of the moon and even bring some of it back down to Earth. Our Asia correspondent Nicole Johnston is in Beijing this morning. This is all rather exciting. What details do we have?
Well, this is a big deal for China, and this rocket launch will be taking place from the southern island of Hainan. It's part of China's ambitious plan to try and get its own astronauts on the moon by 2030. But what's significant about this mission is that if everything goes to plan, the lunar probe will go to the far side of the moon. That's the side that we can't see from Earth. It will collect samples and then return to Earth. And China would be the first country to have achieved this. There is a real space race underway at the moment. The United States is actually just ahead. It wants to get its own astronauts back on the moon by 2026, a few years ahead of China. And NASA has been really increasing its rhetoric against China and China's space program. But China says that it's for peaceful purposes and it wants to foster international cooperation.
OK, Nicole, thank you. And of course, we'll bring you live coverage of the launch here on Sky News when it happens from about 10:20, I think, Hannah.
Oh, fantastic. We'll look forward to it. Thanks, Leah. So it's been a big night for the Labour Party. Let's speak to Labour's National Campaign Coordinator, Pat McFadden. Very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Lots of results to pick over, and I'm sure you'll be pleased with a lot of them. But let's kick off with the by-election win in Blackpool South. Just how important a win is that for Labour?
It's really important because of all the different elections that were taking place yesterday. This is the one where Rishi Sunak and the Conservative government were directly on the ballot paper. Not any local election factors or mayoral personalities or anything like that. In a by-election, it's the government that's on the ballot paper. And when that happened, we got a stunning victory with a 26% swing, and the Tories struggling even to come in to second place. So we're absolutely delighted with the Blackpool by-election.
They would say, though, there were unusual circumstances, the nature in which the Tory MP had to stand down in a lobbying scandal. They also say
Not that unusual these days.
Well, they also said that a lot of people stayed at home as well, something that wouldn't happen in a general election. They would say you can't take too much from this by-election result and transfer that onto a general election, because the same thing might not happen.
Well, if they want to take comfort from all of that, you know, they're welcome to do so. There's going to be a lot of counting over the next few days, a lot of claim and counterclaim. And through all that, the thing that we'll be looking at most is what is the picture in the key battleground seats that will be decisive at the general election. The overnight evidence is we're doing well in those, not just in Blackpool, but in places like Thurrock or Grimsby or Southend-on-Sea. These are critical constituencies come the general election. And that's what we'll be looking at more than anything else over the next couple of days as people try to analyse all these results.
Sticking with the Blackpool South result just for a moment, do you think what happened was that people changed their vote from the Conservatives to Labour, or do you think that your candidate won simply because of a collapse in the Tory vote?
Well, I get asked this a lot. I spent some time canvassing in Blackpool and in other parts of the country, and I think there's been this mood that maybe Labour's poll position or our electoral successes in the last year or two are just down to disillusionment with the Tory party. That's a factor, but I think there is positive enthusiasm for Labour and a recognition of the changes in the Labour Party that Keir Starmer's made, particularly those critical underlying tests beyond any policy that voters look to, which is, can I trust you with public money? Can I trust you with national security? You know, that's the basic starting point for any electoral conversation. We're now passing those tests in a way that we weren't a few years ago, and I think people recognise that's because of the changes Keir Starmer's made in the Labour Party.
And do you think that the results that we've seen overall put the Labour Party on course for a really quite big majority at the next general election? I mean, is the case that you want to make actually you're doing quite well when you look at everything that we've seen overnight?
I would never use the language that you just used. Not a single vote has been cast in the general election. What I think these results show is that we've made enormous progress in the last few years, that we're a changed force, back in the service of the British people, back in the mainstream of British politics, passing those tests that I said, but the general election is yet to come. I think there's a mood for change in the country, and the only way that people will get change is by getting rid of the Tories and voting in a new Labour government, and that's the case that we'll take to them whenever the general election's called.
And there's no question that the results look bad for the Tories. They would say that was inevitable. It was a high watermark last time these seats were contested because they were enjoying a COVID vaccine rollout bounce. And also, some would say that Labour hasn't always been, in the results we've seen so far, the party to benefit from the Tory losses. The Independents have picked up quite a few seats around the country, and the Greens as well. Is that something you're concerned about at all?
Well, I think with regard to the Tories, they're running out of road with that excuse. Sometimes, look, in mid-term, governments lose local elections or do badly at them. That's been a pattern in our politics for a long time, but it's not mid-term. It's the eve of a general election, so it's difficult for them to dismiss these results in a way maybe they could a year or two ago. And, you know, it is a more varied tapestry than it has been perhaps in the past. But what will really matter, as I said, when all the dust settles and all the analysis is done, is what is the picture in those critical marginal constituencies? Because they will decide whether we get another 5 years of the Conservatives or a Labour government, and that's where the battle is really going to take place.
But in that case, what happened in Harlow? On Tuesday, Keir Starmer went to Harlow and saw my colleague Beth Rigby, and when they were there, Keir Starmer was saying these are exactly the kinds of places that we need to win, and then perhaps defying expectations, you didn't pick up the council. What do you think? What do you think held you back there?
Look, we did well. We got a swing to us. We just fell short. I mean, it was a matter of a few dozen votes, I think, across the council.
And you need massive swings to win at a general election.
You know, well, we did get a massive swing in Blackpool last night, where a parliamentary seat was on the table. Look, if there's any place where we haven't done quite as well as we want, my message is always just work harder, do more.
And where would that be? So that'd be Harlow, Peterborough, where else?
Well, I don't want to pick out individual seats, but I think we are doing well around different parts of the country. You've also got to take into account the Scottish factor, where I think we'll gain seats as well. And we've been nowhere in Scotland for the last 10 years. 1 or 2 seats is all we've had there. And I think, we're going to be making gains there too. So in different parts of the country, we are doing well. We've made progress. I'm the first to say there is still work to do. And winning a majority at a general election is not an easy thing to do. But that's what we are going to be fighting for whenever the Prime Minister calls the general election.
Can I just ask you about Labour's stance on Gaza? Is that proving to be a problem at all? About 100 Labour councillors quit the party over it. Some of them stood as independents. Are you worried about losing the support of some voters over that? I mean, Oldham, for example, that you've lost control of Oldham. It's gone to no overall control. Do you think that could be one of the reasons why there?
I think it is a factor in some parts of the country. I think there's no point in denying that. And I understand why people feel strongly about this. Thousands of innocent people have been killed. People want it to stop. They want to do something about it. And if there's a case or parts of the country where we've lost support on that issue, then we will work hard to regain it. But it is a factor. There's no point in me denying that. I think overall, we're still doing really well. And when all the votes are counted in a couple of days' time, I'm sure that picture will be maintained. But this is a factor in some parts of the country.
Do you need to do more, though, to win back those votes that were lost because of the Gaza issue? Are these people that will automatically come back to you for a general election? Or does Labour need to evolve its position further to show those voters that it does care more about what it's doing in Gaza? Do you admit that it went wrong?
There's nothing automatic in politics. In terms of the position, what Keir Starmer's set out is really 2 things since the beginning of this phase of the conflict about 6 months ago. One was that Israel had a right to defend itself, but the second was there had to be a better future for the Palestinian people. And we feel that very strongly. And if we were to win at the general election, that would be a huge foreign policy priority for Keir Starmer's government.
OK, well, we are out of time. We might see you again during the day, I guess, or tomorrow. There's results coming in all the time, but...
It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, well, thanks very much indeed for coming in, Pat McFadden. Thank you. Stay with us. We've got lots coming up for you here on The Breakfast Show. Pollster Lord Hayward is going to give us his take on what the results could mean for the general election. Plus, Jackie will be here with all the sport, including why Tiger Woods can start preparing for next month's US Open despite failing to qualify. welcome back to The Breakfast Show. So Sam Coates and I are now joined by Trevor Phillips and the pollster Lord Hayward. So we've got a busy set here and lots to talk about because those results have been rolling in from the local elections in England and Wales, as well as the Blackpool South by-election. And let me just tell you what they show so far, because it's been a big night for Labour and there are losses everywhere for the Conservatives. So let's just take you through the main headlines. And Labour is celebrating victory in the Blackpool South by-election. Chris Webb won a majority of over 7,500 votes. The Conservatives scraped into second place, just 117 votes ahead of Reform. Sir Keir Starmer has declared it a seismic victory and the most important of all the results today. The Labour leader also suggested that the victory has sent Rishi Sunak the message that it's time for a general election. Labour has also made gains in local council contests in England. They've taken Redditch and Rushmore in Hampshire from the Tories, and they've gained Thurrock and Hartlepool from no overall control. So let's chat through all these political developments with this very fine panel I have here in front of me. Lord Hayward, to you first of all, just how bad a night has it been so far for the Tories?
Oh, there's no question. It has been bad. They're losing about 50% of the seats, which is what Colin Rowlings and Michael Thrasher suggested was likely to be the case. And when they're facing the Labour Party, they're losing to the Labour Party.
And so what does this mean for Rishi Sunak? I mean, we've got many more results to come in, including key mayoral contests that are being fought. If two of the candidates that both sides seem to set a lot of store by, in Tees Valley and West Midlands, if the Tories lose both of those, are we going to see letters of no confidence going?
I think it's unlikely. I think the kind of air of the balloon of let's have a leadership contest has dissipated, deflated in recent weeks. Talking to Tory MPs, they know they're in trouble, but they also have got the message, with the exception of a vocal but small minority. They've got the message that actually trying to change leader at this stage would make you sort of the laughingstock not only of this country but the whole of the Western Europe.
Is that what you're picking up as well, Trevor, from your conversations with politicians?
Yeah, I mean, at the risk, Anna, because I'm on Sunday morning, of having to do a reverse ferret on Sunday morning, I think what Robert says is absolutely right. I mean, you can't account for the madness of MPs, but the truth of the matter is... The truth of the matter
You're talking to a former one.
Actually, you can't see any circumstance in which a leadership contest in the Conservative Party is in any way to the advantage of the Conservative Party.
That's right.
And actually, I think it will exacerbate what I think is the main feature of what I can see so far, which is about the electorate, really. This is grumpy Britain. This is grumpy Britain. It's not Britain in love with Labour. It's not Britain that just hates the Tories. It's Britain that doesn't like anybody very much. And what you're seeing, probably, I mean, I heard what Sam said earlier on, is certainly a splintering of the forces on the centre-right. And that's what we're seeing. That's why Reform. There's also actually a splintering on the left, but it's not so obvious. But look at the performance of the Greens, which is... They're kind of outperforming right now. So I think what we're seeing so far is a situation in which I don't think either of the big parties ought to be breaking out the champagne too much. The question is, would that be repeated in a general election where voters know that a vote for Reform or a vote for the Greens isn't necessarily going to deliver you a Reform or Green MP?
Look, what I think's happened overnight, and I'd be surprised if the picture changed in the next couple of days, but I think what we're seeing is the splintering, the collapse of the Boris Johnson voting coalition from 2019. And I think that's in evidence in Blackpool, a bit of the Red Wall. I think it's in evidence in Hartlepool, where you've got actually Reform eating into the Tory vote and it going to the Labour Party. I think it's there in the south and the north. My question to both of you is, can Rishi Sunak do anything about it? Sure, the MPs won't, on current trends, unseat him, but it's all over, isn't it?
I think it's incredibly difficult for him. John Curtis and others have said the chances of the Conservative victory are minuscule. And generally, governments last about a decade and a half, either side. So the Tory party has a massive task. But what is striking is that people don't even believe that the Tories have cut inflation. Halved it, one of the prime Rishi target. And the reason that's been is because this element of the Conservative Party been arguing with the rest of the Tory party and giving you the opportunity, instead of discussing the successes on a thing like inflation, to discuss the disruption within the Tory party.
So it's politics, not policy, you think?
Absolutely.
That's the problem here?
Yes.
A bit depends, Sam, on what the Tories' aim is, actually. Is their aim to win, which I would dare to suggest is basically pretty pointless right now, because the country has stopped listening to Conservatives, just stopped listening? Or is their aim to reduce the scale? Would the general election be a bad result for the Tories or an extinction level event for the Tories? And my guess is that most Tories are now thinking, let's avoid extinction, let's just have a bad result. And the answer to your question about what they need to do, if I can put it this way, I sat opposite the Conservative, the Prime Minister last week, and I think he reflected the country's bad temper. And actually, I don't think it's a good look.
So, very quickly, in order to lose less badly, does Rishi Sunak go to the country sooner, the summer, or later in the autumn, Rob?
I sat here in February last year and said the election will be in October 2024, and I still believe that.
But should it be if the Tories want to stem the losses, right?
Oh, yes, no question about it, because the economy, in terms of inflation, etc., will move to the government's advantage
even though
over the next...
that's not really helped to date, and even cuts in national insurance don't seem to have moved the dial.
No, but it is the way, the best way forward for them.
And what do you think about the timing of an election?
Well, I don't think it can get worse. Let's put it that way. So I think I'm with Rob here. It's a macabre strategy, isn't it? Something's going to turn up.
Yeah.
I'll tell you something that'll turn up. The sentencing bill. The sentencing bill is going to go through Parliament, and there's going to be another massive Tory revolt on the right. After that, I don't know whether that's going to leave Rishi Sunak.
And finally, a big quick thought about Labour. Have they done enough to relax about a general election? I mean, what do they need to see happen in these local elections? Clearly, we're only part of the way through the results, but what do they need to see happen to be able to feel comfortable about their prospects?
They won't feel comfortable, because until you've got the votes counted at a general election, you can't feel comfortable as a party leader. And there are places, as Trevor's just said, where clearly people are grumpy with all politicians. The rate of return of independence in places in the north of England is quite striking.
And what about Scotland? Can I just ask about Scotland? Because obviously we've been reporting a lot this week on the SNP's troubles, and now having a new leader coming in. What does that mean for Labour? Does it take the pressure off?
Oh, it helps them enormously, because the problem in Scotland, my calculation is that the Labour Party gains 5 seats to every one the Conservatives gain in Scotland as a result of the decline of the SNP. So that decline will help Labour enormously get to their majority.
So we've seen a strong performance from Reform in Blackpool South, maybe not second place, but nevertheless undoubtedly eating into the Tory vote. Saw that in Hartlepool. What should Rishi Sunak do about that? There is a suite of options that he could reach for to sort of aid reform policies. He could promise at the next election to leave the European Convention of Human Rights, to go a bit further on certain policies. Would that be satisfying the party, playing to the membership, solidifying that vote on the right? Is that the right electoral strategy for the man in number 10?
It's a difficult one, because at the same time as the Tories are losing votes in places like that, they're also facing serious difficulties in places like Winchester, who would want to receive a very different message, and we'll get the results today from parts of Surrey, which I think will be more like Winchester and less like
it's a balancing act.
It is a balancing act. It's a
feet on both pedals. What do you do? Do you lean Reform or lean to try and hold up the blue wall and those One Nation Tory voters?
I think they will try and improve their messaging on competence, on economic competence, rather than trying to lurch in one direction or another with specific issues, which, as Trevor says, people have stopped listening in certain things. So short-term messages at the end of a parliament don't work.
And we had Richard Tice on a couple of weeks ago, and Richard Tice basically said, we want to destroy the Tories. Now, the only thing I think that Tories can do is essentially get themselves into a place where reform changes its tune, and they do what Nigel Farage did last time round, which is say, OK, we'll do some kind of deal to make sure that Labour doesn't get in.
Rob Hayward, you know Rishi Sunak, you know people around Rishi Sunak. What's his state of mind right now?
Well, he's going to wait and take all the results. And I think I forecast yesterday that the Tories would not win West Midlands mayoralty. So there are a number of results which I think he'll actually be relieved about.
Well, what's his state of mind been in recent days?
I don't know him personally, but in terms of on a day-by-day basis, his state of mind, when you're in these sorts of circumstances, you develop a resilience which says, I've got to carry on, I'm dealing with Rwanda, I'm going to deal with the economy, and if things turn out right, they turn out right.
People say he's not very good at politics. Do you absolutely trust the political team in Number 10 and their instincts?
Very quick answer.
Any politician doesn't trust anybody other than themselves.
That's not a yes. The reason I was rushing you there is that we've got live pictures now coming into us from Blackpool. This is the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, thanking all the people who've campaigned for the Labour candidate, Chris Webb, who won a stonking victory in the Blackpool South by-election. He won with a swing of over 26% for Labour. Let's see if we can listen in.
Today, we absolutely smashed it, won every polling district. Blackpool turned red. They want Labour. They want Keir in Number 10. They want a Labour government. The people of Blackpool South have made it clear. Rishi needs to admit he's failed and call a general election now, and let's get a Labour government.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you to all the activists. You really have put a shift in. And thank you to the people of Blackpool for putting their trust in Chris, who's born and bred, who has done so much for Blackpool and the people here. And he knows that 14 years we've had nothing but broken promises, austerity, our kids not given the opportunities they deserve, the housing we desperately need in this country, the good, secure jobs that people need. And the people of Blackpool have seen through the Tory lies and chaos, and they want change. We all want that change. Rishi Sunak, call that general election and let this country move forward. And now I'm going to hand over to hopefully the next Prime Minister of this country, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Ange. Thank you, Chris. Thank you to this brilliant team here and all the people that supported you in this historic campaign. It is incredible to have won by such a swing, 26% swing. That's the fifth swing of over 20% to the Labour Party in by-elections in recent months and years. It is a fantastic result, a really first-class result. And here in Blackpool, a message has been sent directly to the Prime Minister, because this was a parliamentary vote. This was directly to Rishi Sunak to say we're fed up with your decline, your chaos and your division, and we want change. We want to go forward with Labour. And Chris, you've smashed that. That wasn't just a little message. That wasn't just a murmur. That was a shout from Blackpool. We want change. And Blackpool speaks for the whole country in saying we've had enough now. After 14 years of failure, 14 years of decline, we need to turn the page and start afresh with Labour, which has a positive plan for the country, a plan to get us building again the houses we desperately need, the infrastructure, the transport, to get our NHS back on its feet and functioning properly for the people of Blackpool and across the whole country, to make our streets safe from antisocial behaviour that blights too many communities. That plan is there. We had a positive message into this by-election, and we've been heard. Chris, you've been heard. You've been made history. Even before being sworn in as an MP, you've made history here in Blackpool. But coming out of this morning, there is one clear message, which is let's turn the page on this decline. Let's pull together as a country. We believe in this country. We believe in our businesses and our communities. We don't accept this hopelessness of the Tories that nothing can get better. We have a positive case. We want to take our country forward. This is a giant step on that journey. Well done, Chris. And thank you to every single person who voted here yesterday and put their faith in a changed Labour Party. No more decline. Forward with Labour. Thank you very, very much.
Morning. Okay, very good. How are you?
Right now, yes, I've got Sakir with me now. So, Sakir, are you going to...
Look, we want that general election, and we're confident going into that general election, because what this by-election says is that the country wants change. This is a very clear divide now. We've had 40 years of failure and decline. We've just got chaos and division from the Tories. People want to turn the page on that and go forward with Labour and our positive plan for the country.
And direct, yes. Why so cautious when you've had such a big win?
We want a general election. We want to win that general election. We want to take our country forward. And I thank every single person who voted Labour yesterday and put their trust in a changed Labour Party. But, you know, politics and by-elections are about messages. And obviously there's a lot of discussion now. What does this mean? I think it's really straightforward. People have had enough. They want to turn the page, want to go forward with Labour. They know we've got a positive plan. And I think now, you know, that's a direct message to the Prime Minister. The most direct of all these results that we're coming, you know, many are in, more to come. But this was a direct message to the Prime Minister, which is...
OK, we're going to leave the Labour leader there in Blackpool because it's difficult to pick up what he's saying to that reporter there. We'll try and go back to him when he speaks to Rob Powell, our political correspondent who's there in Blackpool for us. But we heard there from the winning Labour candidate, Chris Webb, who's won Blackpool South with a swing of 26.3% from the Tories. Keir Starmer hailed it as a first-class result. A quick thing from... thought from Sam Coates while we looked at those pictures of Blackpool South and a very happy-looking Labour leader there.
That's right. You can see on the screen why, you know, Chris Webb, the Labour candidate, getting over 10,000 votes compared to the Tories, who did hold the seat on just over 3,000. You look at the vote shares as well. That's a stonking relative majority. There's a massive decline in turnout. Look, Keir Starmer was standing there a moment ago and saying to his candidate, "You smashed it." There is a real desire within the Labour Party to use results like the one that you can see, Labour up 20.6 percentage points, to say, we're winners. The message from Labour folk on the broadcast, on the airwaves, all morning is going to be, we're winners. They want you to hear that message. Now, there are little bits of, you know, results that are a little bit more complicated for Labour. The big story of the night is the collapse in the Tory party and, you know, really the vote for number 10 is a vote between Tories and Labour, so Labour are the beneficiary of that, but there are a few areas of complications. But the big strategic aim of Labour, and I think you saw that right there with Keir Starmer's remarks, is to say, look, we're winning, the Tories represent chaos, vote for us. And that's exactly what Keir Starmer did in the last few moments in Blackpool in that hurriedly arranged visit to celebrate their victory there. And we may hear more from Keir Starmer in just a moment with our correspondent who's there. But we've just managed to ignore for the last couple of minutes Daisy Cooper, who's joined us here on the set. So my chance now to say a proper hello and welcome to you. Deputy Leader of the Liberal Democrats, of course. Your thoughts on the Liberal Democrats' results so far?
Well, we think that our winning streak is continuing. We've seen some new inroads in places in Hampshire, for example. We've seen the good result in Stockport, where we're on course to win the...
Hold that thought. Yep. Hold that thought. We're going back to Keir Starmer. We will come back to you, Daisy Cooper.
Of course, the most important election result in the sense that it's a direct message to the Prime Minister because this is a parliamentary seat. That's a 26% swing. That's a huge swing. And it's the fifth swing of over 20% in by-elections that we've had in recent months and years. So it's not a one-off.
we've also won in places across the country like Hartlepool, where we needed to win, Rushmore in the south, which is very important to us, Redditch, a bellwether seat. There are seats like Harlow where we lost by a handful of votes, and of course we need to work harder because we want to win across the whole of the country. But this is a good set of results for us, and there's no denying the mood of the country now is for change, and I think it's for the Prime Minister to allow the country to express that change now in a general election.
What's costing you support there? How much do you think the Middle East position is factoring into this?
Look, there are some places where that's a very strong factor, and I understand that and respect that. Where we have lost votes, we will earn them back through hard work, just as we have done on many other issues. But I don't think that that can really shut out the fact that this is a very good set of results for the Labour Party. Vindication of the hard work we've done over 4 long years to change the Labour Party. This is a fundamentally different party to the party that fought in 2019, and you're seeing that, I think, in the results across the country.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great result here today.
So Sir Keir Starmer there saying that the win in Blackpool South was not a one-off, and he said the mood of the country is for one of change. Plenty more analysis of what Labour is saying, but let's go back to Daisy Cooper, because I rudely cut you off there when you were just saying that you felt that the Liberal Democrats had a good night so far in these council elections. It's clear that the Tories are losing a lot of seats, but some might say they would like to see the Liberal Democrats picking up more of them. A lot of them are going to the Greens, aren't they? They're doing well. Independents are doing well. Could the Liberal Democrats actually be doing a bit better than this?
Well, what we've seen so far overnight is there are areas where we are winning seats. And if you look at places like Hazel Grove and Cheadle, for example, both in the Stockport area, it shows that we're winning the popular vote there, and we're on course to hopefully win those seats at the general election. But I think in terms of these local elections, the best is yet to come, we hope. So I think as the day goes on, in many places counting hasn't even started, but by late this afternoon, we should see key areas like Tunbridge Wells, Wokingham, places that have always been considered true blue areas, where Liberal Democrats are now the key challengers. We're hoping to make significant gains in those areas.
So we were looking at the Liberal Democrat seat numbers. Now, our analyst, Michael Thrasher, suggested that the Liberal Democrats should be on course, all things being equal, for about 125 net gains. Now, I'm looking at the early results for you. You've gained 18 so far. It doesn't feel like you're on course for that.
Well, we'll see how it goes as the day goes on. It's really too early to tell to see how many seats there are. But if you look over the...
But proportionately, you're not on course for 125.
Well, let's see how we go. I say we've had some surprise wins during the course of the evening so far, particularly in Hampshire, for example, where we've overtaken the Conservatives to become the largest party in Hart, for example.
By how many seats?
We took one seat there.
So hang on, so your big success was taking one seat?
It's one example of where we've made progress overnight.
Have you got a better example?
We've got examples coming in later on today. The best results we think are yet to come. But if you look over the course of this Parliament, Liberal Democrats have won more council seats than every other political party, more than 660 council seats. We've had those 4 stunning by-election wins, and we are really looking forward to seeing some results later on today, which we hope will consolidate our position in a lot of areas where we hope that we are in a position to win seats off the Conservatives whenever the general election is called.
Liberal Democrats traditionally do well in local elections, don't they? So are you worried about your performance at a general election if you have a slightly disappointing outcome once all the results are in tonight?
I think what's really critical about this set of elections is where we're winning seats. Now, of course, you remember that last May we had a big bumper crop of elections and Liberal Democrats broke the Sky News swingometer. We won more than 400 seats, which was the best case estimate that Sky had given to our party. And as I say, we've been winning seats consistently every single set of local elections for the last few years now. So what really matters today is where we're winning those seats. And if we're winning seats in blue wall areas and in the southwest, so places like Tunbridge Wells, places like Wokingham, places like Dorset, if we're winning seats there, that makes it really, really important that we can then build on that and use it as a springboard to win those seats in the general.
Disappointing then that Rushmore went directly from the Tories to Labour, missing out the Liberal Democrats in a Hampshire army town.
Well, there are places, obviously, in this set of elections, I think Labour was always going to do well because of the types of seats and the location of some of those seats.
But that's one of those southern seats that you're targeting, isn't it?
Well, there are other parts of Hampshire, for example, where we have done really well. So we won 4 seats, for example, in Fareham, in the Suella Braverman's backyard. But the point really is for the Liberal Democrats, the best is yet to come. Let's look at those results by the end of the day, and I think the picture will look very different.
OK, I'm sure we will be analysing that later with you or one of your colleagues. But for the moment, Daisy Cooper, we are out of time. time. So thanks very much indeed for joining us. Plenty more coming up from Sam and I in the next hour. Lots more results to chew over, lots more politicians to grill as well. So don't go away. All the top stories coming up next. Hello, a very good morning. It's 9 o'clock. Coming up on today's show, the results roll in from the local elections across England and Wales, and it's a big night for Labour with victory in the Blackpool South by-election.
We've just heard from Sir Keir Starmer in Blackpool saying they smashed it.
The Tory party chairman admitted on this programme it had been a tough night.
And in sport, Aston Villa are beaten 4-2 at home by Olympiacos in the first leg of their Europa Conference League semi-final.
It's Friday, the 3rd of May. Keir Starmer hails a seismic win for Labour in Blackpool South with a swing of more than 26% from the Conservatives. The Tories scraped into second place at just 117 votes ahead of Reform. Gains for Labour in the council elections too, making its biggest advance in areas that voted for Brexit. In other news, US President Joe Biden calls for order after police clear student protests in Los Angeles.
And Tottenham's hopes of Champions League football next season are hanging by a thread after defeat at Chelsea in the Premier League.
Hello, a very good morning. Thanks for joining us here on The Breakfast Show. So, results have been rolling in from the local elections in England and Wales and the Blackpool South by-election. What they show so far is a big night for Labour and losses everywhere for the Conservatives. Well, Sam Coates is here with us throughout the morning. And Sam, we've just seen the Labour leader turning up in Blackpool.
That's right. Labour will be wanting to make a big deal of that result. The only parliamentary by-election to be held yesterday, Labour won it after a 26-point swing from the Conservatives. What we're seeing at this set of elections, Anna, is Boris Johnson's electoral coalition that gave him a huge majority in 2019 being unpicked. That is a good example of what's happening.
OK, so let's take a look in a bit more detail at that result. So in Blackpool South, Labour's Chris Webb becomes the area's new MP. He won more than 10,000 votes, and that gave him a majority of 7,500 over the Conservative on a huge swing of 26%. The Tories scraped into second place, just 117 votes ahead of Reform. Our chief political correspondent, John Craig, reports from Blackpool.
I declare that Christopher Paul Webb is duly elected as the Member of Parliament for the Blackpool South constituency.
An emphatic victory for Labour's Chris Webb in Blackpool South. A majority of more than 7,500 and a 26% swing. Enough to put Sir Keir Starmer in Downing Street.
People are fed up because nothing seems to work anymore. Hard up because of the Conservative cost of living crisis. But instead of giving up, they got up and voted for change with Labour. Only Keir Starmer's Labour Party has the vision and the ideas to make life better for everyone in our country.
The Conservatives' David Jones was only narrowly ahead of Reform UK's Mark Butcher in second place.
We're the party on the up, and what's rapidly becoming clear, you're seeing it in some council elections elsewhere in the North East, is that we're becoming the real opposition in the North to the Labour Party, and I think that will continue in the Midlands and Wales. So that's, I think, the developing story.
Mr Jones claimed he'd been the underdog in this contest and admitted that Rishi Sunak had barely featured in his election literature.
This isn't a general election, this is about the local impact here, that they want someone local that can represent them well, and we've given the people a vote, they will choose.
That sounds like a no. Was Rishi Sunak on your leaflets?
There was lots of people on my leaflet.
Besides Labour's victory in the by-election here in Blackpool, the party also made gains overnight in local government elections throughout England. But the really big results in the mayoral elections will not be declared until later today and tomorrow. The local election results included Labour winning Rushmore in Hampshire for the first time. Labour won Hartlepool, regaining ground where the party suffered a humiliation in a by-election 3 years ago. Labour also won Thurrock, one of its top targets. The Tories held Broxbourne, while Labour held Sunderland. But in better news for the Conservatives, they held on to Harlow, where Sir Keir had campaigned on the eve of polling day. But the Labour leader claimed the Blackpool South triumph was a seismic win. And, he claimed, the most important result of the night. John Craig, Sky News, Blackpool.
Well, let's go live to Blackpool. Our political correspondent Rob Powell is there for us this morning. And Rob, Labour talking about this being a seismic win, and you've just spoken to a very happy Labour leader.
Yeah, Sir Keir Starmer and his deputy Angela Rayner and the new MP for Blackpool South have all been doing a victory lap here at Blackpool Cricket Club, slightly inland from the sort of famous promenade in the Stanley Park area of the town. They all said that what the result here meant was that Rishi Sunak should call a general election now. Sir Keir Starmer talked about turning the page on years of decline. Look, I think overnight this has been, I think, the most stunning result for Labour. Swing-wise, it is up there with some of the biggest that we have seen post-war, and they have been pulling off results like this in by-elections frequently over the last 18 months. I think that's what will worry Tories. Spending a lot of time in Blackpool yesterday and speaking to people, you just got a sense that people were fed up with some of the chaos we've seen in government, but also fed up with domestic pressures on things like the NHS and cost of living as well. That said, when you look a bit broadly across the country and a bit more widely, there were some areas where Labour pulled off less stunning results. Places like Oldham, where they lost seats, or Harlow, where Sir Keir Starmer visited and said they needed to win in places like that, they didn't. And that's what I asked Sir Keir Starmer about when I spoke to him a few moments ago. Have a listen.
Well, we have had a terrific result here. This is an amazing by-election result. It is, of course, the most important election result in the sense that it's a direct message to the Prime Minister, because this is a parliamentary seat. That's a 26% swing. That's a huge swing. And it's the fifth swing of over 20% in by-elections that we've had in recent months and years. So it's not a one-off.
So look, Sir Keir Starmer understandably putting the emphasis on the result that we've had here in Blackpool overnight. But as I say, I think in places like Oldham and Tyneside, you get a sense that, and it was acknowledged by Sir Keir Starmer in that interview, that his position over Gaza, on the Middle East, on foreign policy has maybe swayed voters as well. So you will find the Conservatives in what is a far more difficult night for them. You know, the Conservatives are without doubt the big losers overnight, trying to put the emphasis on some of those seats where Labour aren't picking up the support they might have hoped for and are even losing some seats as evidence of voters not fully making their mind up and not having any great love for Sir Keir Starmer. I think the other big takeaway from here in Blackpool overnight was the result from Reform. Talking to the Reform candidate for Blackpool South yesterday, he was very confident. He was talking about, yes, definitely second place. That didn't happen. I think he was a strong local candidate. He's worked a lot with people in the area, and I think they will be a bit deflated by that. And I think what that Reform result shows is that the main impact that they may have in a general election is taking votes from the Conservatives, and that is only good news for Labour.
OK, Rob, thanks very much indeed. And as Rob was saying, it's not just about Blackpool South, of course, a host of council election results as well. And here with us to take a closer look at them is Gurpreet.
Well, we've had about a third of the council declarations in so far, and some interesting, diverse stories emerging across the country. I want to get into some of them shortly, but before I do, let me show you the state of the parties. Labour have so far got 319 seats. They've gained 52, but look at the Conservatives, losing 122 seats. Before tonight, we were talking about the Conservatives maybe losing somewhere in the region of 500 seats. It looks like things could play out even worse for them tonight. But that's the state of play so far. However, only 643 seats counted so far. We're only a quarter of the way through, so things could change. Now, I said I wanted to talk you through some of the results, and two that I've picked out for you are Rushmore and Redditch. And they're interesting because they're two seats, or two councils rather, that Labour have wrestled directly from the Conservatives. That's pretty rare in local elections. Firstly, Redditch. Now, Redditch is an interesting area. Traditionally, it's a Labour-held council, but it swayed towards the Tories in 2018. 2021 was bruising for Labour. They were reduced to just 4 seats. However, all the seats on that council were up for grabs tonight. And take a look at this. Labour have taken 10 of those seats, making them the largest party on that council and giving them a majority. And it allows Labour to take a temperature check of the wider Midlands region, which we know is going to be a key battlefield in the general election. So they'll be pleased with that result. And then let's take a look at Rushmore. Very different type of place. It's an army town in Hampshire. Here, Labour have taken 7 seats, overturning the Conservatives' majority of 6. This council has never been a Labour-run council in its 50-year history. So Keir Starmer here has managed to do something that even Tony Blair failed to do. So another good result for Labour there. I want to drill into Rushmore's vote share, because one thing we're hearing tonight is, well, we know that support for the Tories is falling. But who's benefiting from that fallout? Is Labour able to directly convert those Tory voters to Labour, or is it the Lib Dems or Reform or other independent parties who are benefiting? And if we look at Rushmore's vote share, well, we can see pretty clearly that Labour has directly benefited from the Conservative fallout. So another reason why they'll be happy with the result in Rushmore. But that doesn't mean that's happening everywhere in the country. Peterborough, for example, it was a very different story. Labour wasn't able to capitalise in the way they would have liked. We're going to get loads of stories tonight. Are the Lib Dems doing as well in the south of the country as they would like? What impact is Labour's foreign policy having on its voting base? All of these I'm sure you're about to mull over shortly, but I want to end on this. The overall state of play when it comes to councils. Labour on 18, they've picked up 4. The Conservatives, they've lost 3. But as I said, a long way to go, yet only a third of the councils in so far. And we'll bring you more as and when we get them.
Gurpreet, thanks very much indeed. And the counting is still underway. As Gurpreet was saying, just a third of the results in so far. So let's just show you the scene there in Nottingham. There's counting underway now for the East Midlands mayoral contest, one of 10 contests that are being counted up and down the country. I think the East Midlands one due to come in about 2 o'clock this afternoon. And on the right-hand side, you can see the counting for Swindon Council that's underway as well. So still loads of results to come in. But Sam, let me ask you, so far, what do you think the results tell us about how the Tories are getting on?
Well, I think you're right to focus on the Tories because the biggest result tonight, I think, is that we are seeing the unpicking, the unstitching of the electoral coalition that Boris Johnson put together in 2019 when he won that remarkable victory in the face of a lot of pressure. It was at a moment where there was a desire of the country to get Brexit done and Jeremy Corbyn was leader of the Labour Party. And it appears with those two forces gone and now we're down 2 or 3 leaders down for the Conservative Party. Voters are not switching to the Conservatives or not voting for the Conservatives in anything like the numbers that they were just 4.5 years ago. The Blackpool South by-election, one of the biggest swings since the Second World War, delivered another Labour MP. Of course, that had been Tory since 2019. Boris Johnson took that after Labour control since 1997. That reversal, I think, will hit hard. Labour looking to make a lot of it this morning. But when you look at the councils that Labour are picking up, the councils that the Tories are losing, it spans all parts of the country. Now, the Tories will make an argument that in some parts of the country, Labour should be doing even better, pointing at Harlow, for instance, that Keir Starmer, place that Keir Starmer was voting on Tuesday and telling my colleague Beth Rigby we need to win there, and Labour didn't. But I think that in some senses, the race for number 10 is a 2-horse race. So if the Tories are collapsing, I think there is good reason for Labour to feel quite happy.
A quick thought about some of the other parties. Reform, for example, did very well in Blackpool South, didn't quite come second, although they had high hopes for it, but they came pretty close. What are we learning about how much damage they could do to the Tories come a general election? Well,
I think it's that splitting of the vote on the right of British politics that's actually one of the biggest consequences, the most consequential things of this set of elections. In many ways, Boris Johnson managed to push those two forces together when he got his 80-strong majority, and now it's falling apart. Reform showed in Blackpool that they could eat into the Tory vote. They actually showed it even more in Hartlepool, where they didn't win any seats, but they did damage to the Tories. And if you remember back in 2019, in a lot of places, the Tories managed to persuade the Brexit Party not to stand. Here, today, Reform UK standing in areas that they are likely to do well in. But one of the big takeaways of this set of results is that Labour have done a lot better in leave areas. You know, the great sore for the Labour Party back in 2019, now looking like it's being, to some degree, repaired. And Reform are playing that part because if people aren't voting Tory who voted Leave, then in some cases they're switching to Labour, but in other cases they're switching to Reform. But that's just making the job of the Tories holding, you know, their voter base together so much harder.
There was a lot of talk ahead of the local elections that this was a kind of a crucial moment when Tory MPs would consider whether or not they were satisfied with Rishi Sunak's performance. Do you think that, from what we've seen so far, there could be some kind of a triggering of a push to topple him? Or could there be a push for an earlier general election? Are either of those things possible?
Look, there's no doubt it is a terrible, one of the worst nights of local election results so far, with a third of the councils counted for the Tories that we've seen. But your question was about, are Tory MPs about to topple Rishi Sunak, have another leadership election in this Parliament? And I think, judging by the mood of the Tory party in the last few days, because that's a question about emotion as much as it is about psephology and the actual results, I think looking at this spread of results, that's not quite bad enough for them to take action. More importantly, we're at the foothills of the journey of finding out who's winning all those mayoral contests. We had the ballot boxes in the East Midlands being counted in Nottingham on the screen a few moments ago. I think those results, those mayoral results, will give Tories a little bit more comfort because they will pick up some seats in Labour, some mayoralties in Labour areas. Whether or not in reality they should take much comfort from it, I think is a completely different question, but it might just insulate Rishi Sunak, who will be hoping that something comes along to change his political fortune. So whether today changed the date of the election either, not sure it does.
OK, so much to talk about all day, isn't there? And you will be doing that. And later this hour, so I'll see you in a minute, Sam. But for the meantime, let's find out what other news is happening. Leah,
Thank you so much. Yes, US President Joe Biden has called for order after police cleared student protesters from the University of California in Los Angeles. More than 2,000 people have been arrested in connection with the pro-Palestinian protests at least 35 different institutions. Our US correspondent Mark Stone reports from Los Angeles.
Willow Brown. At the university police station, an officer calls the names of the students arrested the night before.
David?
Charged and released with a date in court, they're here now to collect their belongings.
All that? I don't know yet, but I assume yes.
Well, we've been here an hour or so now talking to the students as they come out. They're from all sorts of different backgrounds, different interests. An Arabic studies student, a law student. None of them want to talk to us on camera. They're worried about the legal cases that are ahead of them. But all of them speak about two things: their shock at the police tactics and their defiance in their cause. From the very heart of the protest encampment, our cameras captured the chaos.
This is absolutely ridiculous.
Officers moving in.
They're students!
Tear gas, rubber bullets, and stun grenades to disorientate. They are images which have stirred an already fevered debate about Israel and Gaza, yes, but about much more too. About America, about policing, about free speech. Is it the very essence of peaceful protest, of civil disobedience, or is it, as President Biden said, unlawful chaos? By morning, they were gone, dispersed or locked up. Order, control restored, and protest silenced. And nearby, a thread of history, a young protester embraced by an older one, a woman who had been at New York's Columbia University protests 56 years ago.
You know, the civil unrest of the students back in '68, and it continued for several years, it actually changed the course of the Vietnam War. And hopefully this is going to do the same thing. And I'm so proud of these people here. I'm so proud.
But then a conversation that hints at the wider challenges for America, because this isn't just about Gaza. He is a protester who wanted to remain anonymous, a graduate who feels politically deserted in his own country. For him, no government is better than any on offer.
We are our own support system because we can't rely on the police, we can't rely on the military to keep us safe. When we need to make our voices heard, we need to make them heard, and the only way we can do that without being repressed is by keeping each other safe. And I think that last night and the last few months have really exemplified that.
These protests are aligning a spectrum of dissent. Mark Stone, Sky News in Los Angeles.
Elsewhere, the Foreign Secretary says Ukraine has the right to use British-supplied weapons to strike Russian targets. Speaking in Kyiv, Lord Cameron said it was Ukraine's decision on how it uses the equipment. His visit follows the government's commitment of at least £3 billion of military support to Ukraine. 4,000 patients in England with sickle cell disease will be offered a life-changing treatment from the NHS today. The inherited blood disease affects the shape of red blood cells and their ability to function. Well, the new drug has been described as transformative and can significantly improve people's quality of life by reducing pain and increasing energy levels. Take That have become the latest stars to cancel shows at Manchester's Co-op Live Arena. The band say delays to the opening of the new arena have forced them to move their gigs this month to different venues in the city. China is on a mission to reach the dark side of the moon and even bring some of it back down to Earth. Our Asia correspondent Nicole Johnson is in Beijing this morning. So, Nicole, just give us some of the details. Sounds exciting.
Well, it is a big day for China's space program. This rocket is due to take off in a little over an hour from Hainan Island in southern China. And what's significant about this is that the lunar probe would travel to the far side of the moon. This is the side that we can't see from Earth. It would collect samples, return to Earth, and if all of this goes to plan, China would be the first country to do so. It's been closely watched around the world, but especially by the United States. The rhetoric has really been increasing from NASA. Now, NASA does not cooperate with the Chinese at all. In fact, the US has a law banning it from doing so. But NASA has been accusing China of running a military program in space, of wanting to keep all of the resources to itself. And there is a real space race underway. China wants to get its astronauts on the moon by 2030. The US is a few years ahead. It's aiming for the end of 2026. So we'll have to wait and see. But all of these rocket launches and programs are part of the bigger mission by China to establish a presence and to try and dominate space. But from China's perspective, however, it says it wants international cooperation and that its space program is peaceful.
OK, Nicole, brilliant stuff, thank you. And we'll bring you live coverage of the launch here on Sky News. When it happens, I think it's about 10:20, Anna.
Yes, I thought it was going to be earlier. It's not. 10:20, good to know. So that's not coming up on The Breakfast Show, but there are lots of other things that are, including we're going to get more on the local elections. I'll speak to former Conservative MP and Cabinet Minister Justine Greening and former Labour Party Director of Communications and Strategy, Tom Baldwin. That's coming up.
I will always remember the atmosphere at the Shanghai protests. It was an electric mix of excitement, fear and defiance, and a sense that history was being made.
We beg you to let Madeleine come home.
My most memorable story was, and still is, the disappearance of Madeleine McCann.
I've seen people who believe and strive for the American dream, even in the face of disaster.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. Alex Crawford joining us now from Ukraine.
Their personal possessions are all scattered around the place.
Our economics and data editor, Ed Conway, try and make sense of the big numbers for us.
Things can change incredibly quickly, and that's what they have done.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
So let's just remind you that counting is still underway up and down the country. The vast majority of results not yet in. On your screen now, you can see counting for the East Midlands mayoral contest, for example, in Nottingham, one of 10 mayoral contests that are being counted today. And I think some are being counted tomorrow, actually, as well. And then local councils across England and Wales still counting as well. The one on the right of your screen is Swindon Borough Council. So plenty of results still to come. In the meantime, though, Blackpool South by-election, that result is in, and Sir Keir Starmer has said that Labour smashed it there. They won the by-election with a 26% swing from Labour. And as you can see, Sir Keir Starmer has been up there congratulating party workers this morning. And just a few minutes ago, he spoke to our political correspondent, Rob Powell.
Are you disappointed by what happened in Harlow and losing seats in places like Oldham as well?
Well, we have had a terrific result here. This is an amazing by-election result. It is, of course, the most important election result in the sense that it's a direct message to the Prime Minister, because this is a parliamentary seat. That's a 26% swing. That's a huge swing. And it's the fifth swing of over 20% in by-elections that we've had in recent months and years. So it's not a one-off. We've also won in places across the country like Hartlepool, where we needed to win, Rushmore in the south, which is very important to us, Redditch, a bellwether seat. There are seats like Harlow where we lost by a handful of votes, and of course we need to work harder because we want to win across the whole of the country. But this is a good set of results for us, and there's no denying the mood of the country now is for change, and I think it's for the Prime Minister to allow the country to express that change now in a general election.
What's costing you support there? How much do you think the Middle East position is factoring into this?
Look, there are some places where that's a very strong factor, and I understand that and respect that. Where we have lost votes, we will earn them back through hard work, just as we have done on many other issues. But I don't think that that can really shut out the fact that this is a very good set of results for the Labour Party. Vindication of the hard work we've done over 4 long years to change the Labour Party. This is a fundamentally different party to the party that fought in 2019, and you're seeing that, I think, in the results across the country.
Well, our deputy political editor, Sam Coates, is here with me. Sir Keir Starmer there, clearly really happy about Blackpool South. I mean, a 26% swing is huge. How good has their performance been in other counts, in the council elections that are being counted overnight?
Well, I think they've got good grounds to be really very happy so far. We're about a third of the way into the councils being counted. The rest will happen today and tomorrow. And whether you look at it, I don't know, geographically, you've got the Labour Party winning councils in Hartlepool, up in the northeast. You've got them winning Thurrock in Essex. You've got them winning in Hampshire. All of those suggest strong advance for the party in lots of different parts of the country. Or if you look at it through a different lens, I think what's striking about this set of results is just how well the Labour Party are doing in Leave areas. And if you remember back in 2019, in the last general election, back then Leave voters almost uniformly got behind the Conservative Party. So I think that they will be pleased about that. And then there's the 26-point swing in the Blackpool South parliamentary by-election that we've been hearing about, and Rob was talking to Keir Starmer up in Blackpool. It doesn't mean it's a night without a little bit of complication for the Labour Party. I'm careful not to overstate it, but there is some signs. They lost Oldham Council. There is some signs that up in Newcastle they lost a couple of wards. All of that seems to, in part, be because of the party's stance on Gaza, and you heard Labour's campaign coordinator, Pat McFadden, effectively conceding that. I mean, if you look up in Newcastle, you had some pretty striking results. In the Ellswick ward, which the Greens won, last year the Labour vote share was 71%, and they lost on a swing of 30 points. Now, that seems to be, according to the Green co-leader when she spoke to us earlier, that was because of the Gaza issue. Labour hoping to drag that back. Figures like George Galloway will be fighting to try and stop that happening over the coming months. But overall, I think it's the spread of results so far. Whether or not the Metro Mayor's counting is underway in those, but we haven't had any results yet, change that picture at all? Well, let's see over the next couple of days.
Well, yes, and the Tories will want some victories there, won't they? Because how bad things been for them so far, would you say?
Well, look, I think the big picture of tonight is that voting coalition that Boris Johnson knitted together in the general election looks like it's coming unstuck. Now, we've got lots of different pieces of evidence. It's not perfect, and council elections and single by-elections are not perfect replicas for a general election. But what you can say is, with the decline in Leave voters backing the Tories, with the success of Reform UK eating into the Tory result, whether that's in Blackpool South or whether it's even in Hartlepool, where Reform UK didn't win any seats, it is unclear whether in the north, in the Red Wall, or in the heartlands of the south, the sort of blue wall, whether or not where the Tories feel solid, where they can bank on having seats. And you've got two different counts on your screens. Both of them we'll hear the results of later today, both very important. Up in Nottingham, that's actually going to be the Metro Mayor result in the East Midlands. I think Labour pretty confident of taking that Metro Mayoralty. But Ben Bradley, the MP, is standing for the Tories, Nottingham City Council leader, and I think how well the Tories do there in terms of vote share will determine the Tory mood, because there are lots of parliamentary seats around there. They'll want to know just how strong or how damaged the Tory Brandon is there. And Swindon is one of those places that is a key swing area in by-elections. So there will be people, either legitimately or not, reading across to the general election through that result, so that one matters as well.
And we spoke to the Tory party chairman a little bit earlier on, didn't we?
That's right, and I think the Tories are not glossing just how bad the result was. Let's hear from Rick Holden.
It's a patchy picture, but generally, you know, as I said, coming off very good election results in 2021, where we'd gained after 11 years in government, you know, obviously not now. So it is a tough night for the Conservatives.
Rick Holden, he said he'd be ready for a summer general election. Doesn't feel like from these results they'd want it.
No, may well not be then. Who knows? Sam, thank you for that. Do stay with us. We've got lots coming up for you after the break. So let's talk through the results in so far from the by-election and the local elections. Joining me are former Conservative MP and Cabinet Minister Justine Greening and former Labour Party Director of Communications and Strategy Tom Baldwin. And, of course, Sam Coates is still with us as well, of course. And just a quick reminder that counting, of course, still underway in those contests up and down the country. Just a third of the results are in so far. This is the scene in Nottingham, for example. This is the East Midlands mayoralty being counted. One of 10 of those contests, and we'll get that result at around 2 o'clock this afternoon. And this is Swindon, the council election being counted there. So just a reminder, there's still lots of results still coming into us. You can see the state of the parties and the number of seats being won at the bottom of your screen. Oh, and we've got pictures from Walsall as well. There you go. Lots of counting going on, everyone up and underway. So let's bring in Justine Greening and Tom Baldwin to get their analysis of what we've seen so far. Tom, what do you make of the Blackpool South by-election victory by Labour, first of all? They were expected to win, weren't they? But was it a was the scale of the win bigger than you expected?
Yeah, I was talking to people on the ground about it just a couple of days ago, and they weren't expecting one of these record swings. I think they've now got the third biggest swing in Labour Party history in a by-election. And so, at the moment, they're cock-a-hoop because they think this is the contest that matters. This is the parliamentary contest. This is the one when Rishi Sunak's government and his record is on the ballot paper, rather than all the local factors and personality factors you get in the local and mayoral contests. So they've done much better than they thought they would do in Blackpool.
And yet the Tories would say there are personality factors, the fact that the manner in which the Tory MP exited in a lobbying scandal, for example. Do you think they have a point, or should they be really worried about the scale of this swing?
I think whichever party you're in, the Blackpool result was way worse for the Conservatives than I think people had expected. And I think the problem is if the party has a strategy now of essentially trying to be reform light, even if you added both those parties' votes together in Blackpool, it's still nowhere near beating Labour. And so I think where the Conservatives are this morning, and there's a lot of results still to come in, is what is the plan? Because it's not going to be enough just to try and garner another 10% from the reform vote. What we've seen is that strategy over the last 2, 3, 4 years has simply taken the Conservative Party down a political cul-de-sac, and that's where it finds itself, I think, today.
So what would you recommend? I mean, you were in government. What should they do? They've tried tax cuts. That doesn't seem to have moved the dial. They can boast about inflation coming down to their target. They can say they've got the Rwanda bill through. It doesn't seem to be helping them so far. So what would you recommend that they do?
That's right, and that's because the party isn't setting out, under Rishi Sunak, a broad vision for Britain. People voted for a different kind of Britain after Brexit. They wanted a Britain that was levelled up, that had equality of opportunity. Rishi Sunak has essentially ditched that. And I think in doing so, you've seen the party go backwards in the polls. So that needs to become centre stage again. And I think for Rishi Sunak, you know, it's interesting listening to Richard Holden out on the airwaves today talking about the credit for 14 years of a Conservative government, for example, in education, an area that I was Secretary of State in. Yet the Conservative Party conference back in October last year, Rishi Sunak was setting aside 30 years of what he called a failed political consensus. I think the reality is that at the top of the party, there has not been a sense of how to proceed, both in terms of where the party wants to take Britain or how to build an electoral coalition of voters to support that.
Yeah, I mean, for most of my life, the Conservative Party has been this formidable election-winning machine, probably the best anywhere in Western democracies. And, I've been on the Labour side and I've seen, we've lost. It doesn't seem like they're the sensible party of government at the moment. I mean, Keir Starmer has this phrase about what he's done to the Labour Party. He's turned it inside out. He's turned it from a party that looks inwards to its activists to a party that looks outwards to the voting public. The Tory party seems to have done the opposite. They've gone from a party which actually felt like a sensible, grown-up party to one which listens only to quite marginal, extreme activists who've taken Rishi Sunak away from the centre ground, off into the Badlands. They elected Liz Truss. They gave us Boris Johnson. They wrecked Theresa May's government. She couldn't get a good Brexit deal. They forced David Cameron to have a referendum in Europe. Almost everything that sort of strange that's happened in British politics over the last 20 years has been down to this very small group of Tory party activists and the change of the Tory party.
Look, from the early results, it seems inescapable that the electoral coalition that Boris Johnson put together in 2019 has splintered. Whether it's Reform, whether it's Labour advancing, all of that is a problem. Labour are now in a good position. But Labour will be worried that they might lose that. I'm interested from both of you. What could change the current political situation? Labour's worried about black swan unexpected events. The Tories have the platform of government to do something. What do you both think could actually change the dial in British politics?
Well, Morgan McSweeney, who's director of Labour's campaign, likes to point out that back in 1997, last time Labour won a big majority from opposition, 70% of people always voted the same way. Now it's only 40%. The electorate is very volatile. And so Labour are definitely not taking anything for granted. They know that their big poll lead could evaporate quite fast. And I thought it was quite interesting today, Pat McFadden on the radio, as I was coming in, was talking about, there is a problem with some Muslim voters, not most, but some. And that's kind of quite self-confident. You don't normally get politicians the day after elections admitting that they've got a problem. But I think they're looking at, where they need to improve, where they are absolutely focused on victory. And those comments from Pat McFadden, I thought, were interesting in their honesty, because that's what they're going to do. They're going to try and sort out every potential problem that comes their way.
I think that there's two areas, really. One is that over the coming months there's going to be a lot of digging into the Labour manifesto, and in particular in relation to public spend, and I think those are tough questions for both parties. But I think the other massive thing that could change, Sam, is, of course, Reform and its candidates. And at the last election, a big part of Boris Johnson's landslide was the fact that Nigel Farage was forced to stand aside. Reform today are adamant that that won't happen. But they, in a sense, are that crucial added dimension in the forthcoming election that wasn't there in 2019, a fractured right-wing vote, which previously was united. But the point in between times is the pressure's coming from the fact that it hasn't delivered on the promise of levelling up for the British people, and that's why it's under pressure.
In a very quick word, is Rishi Sunak safe?
No, I don't think he is, and I think a lot of MPs will take the bank holiday weekend to consider what these results mean in their own communities and for them personally. So whether or not they say that in public, I think a lot of MPs will be thinking through that question in private.
There's some Labour people I know who'd be quite content, in a way, Ben Houchen and Andy Street, hang on, because people will see that as a sign that, these results weren't so quite as bad as people thought for the Tories after all. And if that means Rishi Sunak hangs on, they think that's not a bad thing either. They don't want to change the narrative. Anything that's uncertain, which might just change things around, a new Prime Minister who hasn't been exposed to sunlight yet, that could still change things. They want to keep things as they are, keep this narrative. They don't want any surprises.
Fascinating stuff. So we will watch and wait and see if anything emerges in the days ahead. Thanks both very much indeed, Justine Green and Tom Baldwin. And thanks to Sam, who has a little lie down before picking up again at 10 o'clock. Just while he goes away and finds somewhere horizontal, let me just show you the pictures of the counting that's underway at the moment. So on the left of your screen, this is Nottingham, where they're counting for the East Midlands mayoral contest. Around 10 mayoral contests taking place across the country, and we will get those results in a staggered fashion like we did for the council elections as well. And Swindon is an example of one of those underway now. The Swindon council election count is going on right now. So loads more election results coming in, but let's get some sports results just to mix it up a bit. Jackie's back.
It was a bad night in Birmingham.
For Aston Villa?
In football.
Yeah, well, there you go.
I have no idea about the election results in Birmingham, but in football it was bad. But in a funny way, it was actually quite a good night for Aston Villa in other ways. Let's have a look.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
The Whitsunday Islands, spectacular every day of the week, on the surface at the very least. the brightest of white sand beaches, the clearest of azure blue seas. The most perfect of places for an F1 driver to relax after a hectic start to the season.
Oscar, great to see you, and what a place. Here we are at the Whitsundays. Impressions?
Yeah, it's very, very nice. I've been here once before when I was a little kid, but it definitely doesn't get old, so it's nice to be back.
Yeah, F1 is a pretty intense world, I guess. When you do get away from it all, do you try and connect with nature?
We go to a lot of cities and a lot of amazing places in Formula One, but yeah, getting outside of the city sometimes and getting into nature is always nice. I think, especially in my home country, in Australia, it's nice to see small parts of it, definitely.
The Great Barrier Reef, you know, it's an iconic natural wonder of the world. Do young Australians feel protective of it? Because it's not in the best of health right now, as you know.
Yes, correct. I think we are very protective of it, and I think, again, as I've gotten older and come back and trying to see it now, yeah, I think I'm more and more protective of it, and I want the future generations to be able to see it, so it's very important for all of us.
The Great Barrier Reef is the size of 70 million football pitches, big enough to be seen from space. But to say it's losing its lustre is putting it lightly. Climate change has caused global sea temperatures to rise, and in the last 8 years alone, there have been 5 mass bleaching events. That's where the coral is stressed, its colours fade and turn a deadly white. If the coral suffers, so does everything dependent on it, and reefs support a staggering quarter of all marine life, more species than are found in rainforests. But this is where McLaren want to step in, using F1 innovation for good.
We decided as part of our climate contribution programme to partner with the Great Barrier Reef Foundation because there is such an important need to help restore and preserve damaged ecosystems. We have a lot of engineering expertise. We look at data and analytics. We have a high performance culture, and we're really targeted on what we're trying to achieve, and we do it at speed. And that's really what the world needs in terms of climate solutions.
McLaren care about this issue. They want to represent. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's a great part of McLaren and part of our culture. Definitely is trying to help the world in ways outside of motorsport. Of course, we're a racing team and a Formula One team, and we strive to be successful on the track. But I think we want to leave a mark on the world as well, and not just be a successful Formula One team.
Last year, success took a while to arrive. McLaren had to wait 10 Grand Prix for their first podium at Silverstone. Oscar then won the sprint race in Qatar, the team eventually 4th in the Constructors' Championship. The Reef requires a similar comeback story.
Really dumb question here, but there's no left or right. Right, okay.
This nation, that wide outdoors and the coastal lifestyle and the beach and the ocean, it helped make Oscar. So, you know, in a way, he's giving back and helping her be stronger as well. So I'm really excited.
This is the underwater footage you're probably used to seeing when it comes to destinations like the Reef. The reality, however, is rather different. The punchy, bright hues are gone. The pastel yellows and browns dominate.
I really do believe with what we...
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
Jackie, thanks very much indeed. Do stay with us here on The Breakfast Show. We'll have all the latest analysis and discussion about the local election results with our political editor, Beth Rigby. That's coming up next.
Hester and Pickle have come to visit us. Hester is 16 years old and she is living with sight loss.
Hi everyone, I'm Hester and this is my guide dog Pickle. She's amazing. She helps me cross the road, get on public transport and avoid things that might be dangerous for me.
That sounds great. And she's also cuter than a square dancing squirrel. How do I get a guide dog?
For the first time, Beano has created an audio comic where Beano readers can actually listen to the comic strip as opposed to using their eyes to look at the pictures and read it. and it's part of an exciting project that we've been involved with the charity Guide Dogs for the Blind, and we've been working on for the past few months. And it's been an absolute pleasure for us to work with two guide dog owners, Hester, who you heard there, and Alex, and their guide and buddy dogs, Chance and Pickle. It is a big change and a big project for us, but Guide Dogs gave us loads of assistance. And you know, we've done a lot of work on accessibility in the past, so we have audio books now that kids can buy and listen to our fiction stories and things like that. So we're always looking at ways to improve the accessibility of essentially of print, which is you know, as an old but still incredibly popular format. And it's been a massive learning experience for us. Hester and Alex are inspirational kids.
We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news. Greg Milam, Sky News, Manchester.
Well, let's bring in our political editor, Beth Rigby, now to get her take on the results that we've had flowing in overnight. Beth, what do you make of them?
Well, look, Anna, it's early days yet, but look, the results so far are as bad as they could have been for the Conservatives. As of this morning, they're on track for losing half of their council seats. That's the Michael Thrasher up to 500-seat loss prediction. But what is taking the pressure off Rishi Sunak, I think, a bit in the short term is that Labour's not managing to pick up all of those seats. So there is something for the Conservatives to grasp onto. They will no doubt point to some of these mayoral races as we go through the weekend. But for Labour, they're not picking up as many council seats, although they've had that big win in Blackpool South. So there's things that they can point to that make them feel comfortable saying we're on course to win a majority in a general election. Blackpool South, which we can come on to, massive swing. And then some of these councils, Rushmore, they didn't expect to take that, Redditch, Thurrock. So they can argue across all the battleground areas, the red wall, the blue wall, Labour's showing progress. So fascinating set of results.
Yeah, and everyone's going to scrutinise them really carefully because it's the last chance that we have of looking at how people vote ahead of a general election. So what does it mean for the general election? Because obviously Labour are going to be looking for signs that they can pull off a majority. Can they feel comforted so far?
Well, look, Anna, the thing about the seats is the Conservatives, what is clear is they're having a terrible night. It might end up as one of their worst performances ever in local elections. They're about 120 seats down, near 120 seats down. But look where the seats are going. Look at Labour, they're picking up over 50, so half of them are going to other parties. And the reason that matters that when you're looking at what's happening with the Conservatives, you can kind of compare that, Rishi Sunak's performance at the moment, with John Major in 95-6 in terms of the really, really bad performance. But is there clear mirroring for Keir Starmer when it comes to Tony Blair? that's a bit more complicated because the Labour performance at the moment isn't spectacular in terms of the council seats. And what we're looking for is when you take these local elections and you extrapolate them out, you have a national equivalent vote, and it basically, you try and chart it to see what could happen in a general election. Now, Michael Thrasher's saying that Labour have to be knocking on a national equivalent vote share of about 40%. Now, it doesn't look like Labour are going to get there, so there will be questions about, well, Keir Starmer's doing well, but this isn't like Blair landslide territory of the momentum of the new Labour years. Now, when you talk to Labour strategists about this, what they would argue is, look at Blackpool South. It's one of the biggest swings. 4 of the top 5 swings to Labour they've ever had have been in the past year. And they say they need to be 6 points ahead of them at the end of the day to be on the course for a majority.
OK, so much more coming for you later in the day. For the moment, thank you. Top stories next.